Good morning, 7 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Origin Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf, good morning from both of us. Another busy day.
Prime Minister prepares for a showdown as his key cabinet rival Wes Streeting heads to Downing Street.
But the Prime Minister will hope to seize back control with the King's speech ahead today.
Donald Trump flies to China to meet Xi Jinping and says Iran will be on the agenda.
Also coming up, UK health officials announced plans to allow quarantined Brits to return home after the Hantavirus outbreak.
And Israel's entry makes it through to the final of Eurovision, despite 5 countries pulling out in protest.
Good morning. Thanks for being with us today. Keir Starmer may have survived a near impossible day yesterday, but his hold on the Labour Party remains under threat.
Well, this morning, the Prime Minister will meet with his mooted leadership rival, Health Secretary Wes Streeting, in Downing Street. The meeting takes place just hours before the King's speech, where the government's agenda for the year ahead will be laid out.
So it's been a huge week, right? Yesterday morning on Downing Street, it felt like things were about to tip over the edge. When we were told by Number 10 that the agenda for Cabinet was going to focus on international affairs, we didn't believe it. But that's exactly what Keir Starmer did. So in perhaps the most Keir Starmer move ever, he was saved by process. He told Cabinet that if anyone wanted to raise his leadership, they could see him afterwards, one-on-one. And then he refused to meet them. Now, this morning, Number 10 is spinning that the moment of peril is over. They say Wes Streeting doesn't have the numbers. They say Andy Burnham doesn't have a seat. But are those two things true? Well, we're going to find out. This morning, Wes Streeting is finally going to get his meeting with the Prime Minister. So will he ask the PM to set out a timetable for his exit? Will he resign? Will he launch a leadership bid? But in truth, today might not be the day that Wes Streeting acts, because it's the King's speech later in the morning, a big set-piece event. We'll get more about the government's legislative priorities. Who would want to derail that, given the involvement of the King? So that all means that Keir Starmer might have time. He says he's going nowhere. He says the rebels don't have the numbers. Lyndon B. Johnson said, he always said, the first rule of politics is learning to count. And we're going to find out soon who has done their sums right. In the meantime, though, this is likely to continue.
This is not factional. It's not the right wing of the party eating the left wing or vice versa. This is us just wanting better for our constituents and for the United Kingdom. And sadly, he just doesn't cut through on the door anymore.
Let me just repeat, that is the Labour Party that has the mandate. And he, with what is the most disastrous local authority election result in living memory, he should consider his position.
Leadership is about knowing when to lead and knowing when to step down. And I think Keir Starmer must come to that realisation now that the country isn't behind him.
Bring in Ali. She's in Downing Street for us again this morning. Ali, I guess first things first, what time are we expecting Wes Streeting to enter Number 10 behind you?
I have asked Number 10 and I've asked Streeting's team that question, but I'm afraid I haven't got an answer. And I think that might be because they don't want us chasing after Wes Streeting asking questions, because a source close to Wes Streeting saying that we're not going to be hearing from him after he doesn't want to interfere with the King's speech. But look, I don't think it's a coincidence that Wes Streeting, a man widely seen to want the Prime Minister's job, is in Number 10 today, on a day where we have seen more than 80 MPs publicly saying they don't back the PM, more than 100 MPs saying they do, a split right down the middle of the Labour Party. And of course, we will be watching to see whether those other 200-odd MPs, ministers, cabinet ministers, will we hear more from them today? As Sophie says, you know, it feels like Number 10 want to draw a line under this, say that they're through it. The Prime Minister made clear yesterday, he talked to Cabinet, he said effectively what John May just said, put up or shut up, and we haven't seen anyone put up yet. And I think to an extent the King's speech is a reprieve, because no one wants to interfere with this moment of pomp and pageantry. The King, who we're expecting soon to process into Parliament, into the House of Lords, no one wants to be seen to be interfering with that. After that happens, after the King's speech, which of course is meant to be a moment of great clarity where where the government sets out its legislative agenda. After that, and this extraordinary context, who knows what happens next?
Ali, we were down yesterday on the street together, and you always get
at times sitting on the floor together.
Yeah, we were.
They got a little bit tired. Fair enough, to be fair. to be fair, you're there for a while.
Yeah, we were crouching on the floor in a very dignified and elegant way, I should say.
I didn't say otherwise.
I always think you can get a sense about just how much peril the Prime Minister is under by the number of people outside number 10. How busy is it this morning?
It is, I mean, Sky, as so often, is often the first to be at these events, but has been filling out quite quickly. And yeah, there are a lot of people here. And I think you know that the Prime Minister's in trouble when you start hearing languages from all around the world spoken on Downing Street by broadcasters. You can tell then that there is a genuine jeopardy to his job. That's what we were seeing yesterday. There are a lot of people here now, and it's already, I can see many more since I first arrived this morning. Look, I think as with yesterday, there is no knowing if the Prime Minister makes it through the day. Let's talk about the scenario where he does survive, where he pushes on. We've seen 87 or so of his MPs publicly saying he doesn't want to they don't want him to go on. That's a crucial number because more than that number is where it's a point at which they can defeat parliamentary legislation, backbenchers. So can the government get through the immigration bill they want to, these rules on asylum that we know have split the Labour Party, so many MPs angry about that? Will they be able to get through legislation on send reforms? Will they be able to get through legislation on jury trials? There is so much coming up that is going to be so difficult to navigate. The Prime Minister needs authority, and I mean, I just can't see how he really regains authority about another day of jeopardy. And remember, it's not the first day where we thought the Prime Minister was going to resign, but it is hard to see how he really hobbles on in the long term. And you know, we've seen Prime Ministers in the past, John Major, Theresa May was challenged for, not Theresa May, Margaret Thatcher was challenged for the leadership twice, carry on after leadership challenges. We haven't had a leadership challenge yet. I should remind people, we saw Boris Johnson hobble on after Cabinet Minister Oliver Dowden resigned. But ultimately, those leaders have either been chucked out by the party or by the public. And is that what we're going to see with Keir Starmer?
Ali, great stuff. Thanks so much. We'll be back out to Downing Street throughout the morning. It was fascinating building up to the cabinet meeting yesterday, fascinating building up to this two-headed gathering today. You know what he could do to regain authority?
What?
Fire him.
Yeah.
We're all sitting here waiting to say, what's Streeting going to do?
What's Keir Starmer going to do? It's a very good thought. And I think, will it happen before the King's speech? Will it happen after? It feels like something's going to have to come to a head. The other thing I just want to point out as well is that Labour leadership contests are not done in the same leadership contests. And it's not just people having to say they have no confidence in the Prime Minister, they have to rally around an individual candidate. So this is why the numbers really, really matter here. And this is why you're getting Keir Starmer's allies saying Wes Streeting hasn't got the numbers because people hate him. People don't want him to be the leader. So he can't even get the 81 that he needs to get over the line. We're going to find out, right? Because there's pushback from Team Streeting. It's unclear at the minute, but that's what it's going to come down to.
On the Streeting side of it, you know, I think, of course, it would be... You get so much bad spin if you resign just before the King's speech. So I don't think it's going to happen this morning. But I do think we've had quite a few days now where you could have gone over the top. I mean, particularly yesterday, you know, he did have his put up or shut up moment, the Prime Minister, at the start of the cabinet meeting. And his supporters came and spoke to you and Beth and everybody else straight afterwards. And the Health Secretary just sort of slinked off quietly. So you were given that opportunity, which you already had, by the way, over the weekend. You're going to stand up and show, I'm ready to lead, I'm ready to challenge people. And he hasn't done. I mean, clearly, today is not the day with the King's speech, but I think that the moment starts to slip again.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you're talking there about people coming out of Cabinet and giving supportive statements to the Prime Minister. Also, some of these are people who you would expect to be allies of Wes Streeting as well. So Peter Carr, Liz Kendall, two people who came to talk to us as well to back the Prime Minister. We don't know, it's a guess game at the minute, but, you know, that is what Number 10 is saying. They're saying, look, you know, he hasn't got the numbers.
Now, all of this political volatility has pressured the markets and borrowing costs yesterday hit highs not seen for some 20 years, depending which metric you're looking at. Here is our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, breaking it all down.
Well, we seem to be back on the roller coaster again, and once again looking at charts like this. This is showing you the UK government bond yield. It's the cost of borrowing for the UK government, but it kind of affects all of us as well. It was around about 5% just last week. Then, of course, we had the local election results, and kind of after that, it started to push up. But the thing that's really sparked the latest increase is all of that leadership speculation that's been happening in the past 24 hours, and you can see how it went up really sharply. Then the Prime Minister came out and said, look, I'm staying. And as a result, it's kind of settled around about there, 5.1%. But it's worth just putting that into a bit of historical perspective. So 5.1%, this is the UK government 10-year government bond yield going back to 2008. And just for some context, that's 2022. That's the mini budgets. That spike there. Well, as you can probably see, look, we are higher now than we have been since 2008 when it comes to UK government borrowing rates. And that's basically the market casting its judgment on the UK. And why are they doing that? Well, we'll come on to kind of the government side of it in a moment. But partly it's because, we have really high inflation in the UK, and obviously we're facing this energy price shock. And even before the energy price shock, this is showing you the average rate of inflation across other G7 nations. Here's what's striking. Look at the UK. That's the red line here. Look at where we are in relation to the rest. We used to be kind of middle of the pack, or kind of around about kind of average, and now we're above. We're kind of an outlier when it comes to inflation, and that's before this shock that is coming our way in terms of inflation. So there's an inflation worry, and then on top of that, there's a fiscal worry. And what's that? It's basically the government has a lot of challenges right now, OK? And when you look at public spending, OK, that's that line there. As a percentage of GDP, going all the way back to the 1940s, it is really high, OK? So the amount of public spending right now, just again, to show you some context, OK, it is at the kind of level, we've only seen a few times where it's been higher than it is right now. COVID in 2020, the financial crisis in 2008, in the 1970s, and the oil price shock. That's not very flattering when it comes to comparisons of public spending, and yet that's kind of where we're heading to at the moment. So public spending is high, and so too are taxes. If you look at taxes as a percentage of GDP, the total tax burden, that is also heading up to the highest level basically ever, certainly since the 1940s, and in the coming years, maybe even higher still. So taxes are going up, spending is high, and at the same time, look down here, this is debt interest, so that's the debt that we're kind of paying 5% or more on right now. Even before that, it was at the highest level, or one of the highest levels that we've seen in recent history. So put that all together, and people are wondering, OK, how are you going to sort that out? And the short answer is you need a strong government to be able to kind of deal with challenges like that. And that's kind of what it looked like Keir Starmer had. He had this stonking majority back in the last election, 411 MPs voted through, a landslide. But of course, he hasn't been able to sort that out. And now people are looking at the polling, people out there in markets, looking at the polling, looking at what we saw in local elections. And what does that show you? Well, here's our kind of projection based on the national equivalent vote share. It shows there's potentially a hung parliament, or a chance of a hung parliament, and no majority. And that makes it even more difficult to deal with all these deep-seated problems that the UK has, which is why we're facing so much financial fallout.
Ed Conway breaking it all down there for us. And 8 a.m, of course, we'll be monitoring what happens to UK bond markets when they do open again. And coming up, we'll be speaking to the Paymaster General Cabinet Office Minister Nick Thomas-Symonds. That's coming up shortly.
We'll also be hearing from the former First Minister of Scotland, one Nicola Sturgeon. So very interesting to see what she has to say this morning.
President Trump is now on his way to Beijing, where he says that he'll ask Chinese President Xi Jinping to, in his words, open up China to US companies.
So he spoke to reporters before taking off and confirmed that Iran, unsurprisingly perhaps, will be on the agenda.
What is your message to President Xi as it relates to the Iran war?
Well, I think, number one, we're going to have a long talk about it. I think he's been relatively good, to be honest with you. You look at the blockade, no problems. They get a lot of their oil from that area. We've had no problem, and he's been a friend of mine. He's been somebody that we get along with. And I think you're going to see that good things are going to happen.
Makeup was particularly full on for the president there.
Yeah.
In that clip, more than ever. Our Asia correspondent, Hanan Smith, is in Beijing for us. Hanan, it's not just the short term, I guess, and the Iran war. There's a lot on the agenda.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It is going to be jam-packed. As you say, he is on the way here, on the way to a summit that's being billed as really the most consequential between China and the US for a decade. And I don't think that that's overblowing it, actually, given the context of extreme global volatility that we are living in, the context of just the high competition between the two. You know, if they cannot do some deals that suit each other, if they can't see eye to eye on some issues, if there's tension, if things spill over in any way, I do think the relationship has the potential to spill into something that looks a little bit more dangerous. So I do think it's incredibly important. Trump is, as we said, on Air Force One. Often we would hear him talking to reporters that are travelling with him. We haven't actually heard that yet, but we have heard from the president on Truth Social while he was in the air. He took the opportunity to have a little pop at the media. He likes to do that, of course, but he wanted to correct the guest list, if you like. He wanted to make a very clear point that a certain Jensen Huang is on the plane. Now, he matters because he is the CEO of NVIDIA, the company that makes the leading US AI chips, and those are the chips that China badly wants access to. So his presence, very important. Trump wanted to make that clear. But he also said this in his Truth Social post. He said that she was a leader of, quote, extraordinary distinction, and that he wants China to open up, and that would be, quote, the very first request. Now, I think that's interesting, because I think what he's trying to do is sort of push the narrative, if you like, off Iran, back onto trade, because trade, to be frank, is the easy bit, right? There are things that both of them can give each other without too much pain that would help both of them with their own domestic audiences. I think both want a little bit more stability with tariffs and whatnot, and so expect some sort of pretty easy deals on soybeans and Boeing aircraft, perhaps China being given access to US markets in extra ways. That stuff is, as I said, the easy bit. The bigger, much more complicated context of these geopolitical issues. Iran, of course, by far the biggest, and it's not a great look for Trump. He comes here sort of cap in hand, if you like. He has to ask the Chinese for help to leverage their pressure with the Iranians to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Not a good look, not a good hand at the negotiating table. The Chinese, you know, of course, they love the fact that he's coming here asking them for help. They're not going to give it to him on a platter. They might like to be seen as a sort of global peace broker for sure. But look, they will use that weakness, if you like, to push for some of the things that they want. And that's not just going to be economic, but geopolitical as well. Of course, the big issue for China, as always, is the island of Taiwan, the island it would love to retake, and has said would do so by force if necessary. And while, look, I don't think we're expecting some big sort of joint statement on Taiwan coming out of this, but small incremental pushes that they might be able to achieve with a transactional president who wants wins of his own, they might be quite excited that they might make some progress. I just want to leave you with this final thought, a quote from state media here. It's often the best way that we can get a glimpse as to what the party's thinking. They wrote within the last day that, quote, attempting to deal with China from a position of strength is not a rational choice. And I think that says a lot about China's strategy. They are going to meet strength with strength. They are not just going to give Trump what they want. They are going to be tried to seen as an equal superpower to the Americans. And that's a message they're sending to not just Trump, but to the world.
Helena, great stuff. We're looking forward to yours and James's coverage in the next couple of days for that all-important summit.
Now let's get an update, shall we, on the passengers who were travelling on the cruise ship hit by Hantavirus. You'll remember, of course, the British passengers have been isolating at Arrow Park Hospital in Merseyside, and now UK health officials have said they're going to let them come home.
Olivia's here with more. What's the latest, Olivia?
Well, the latest, actually, that we've got is that 10 people are being brought from the UK overseas territories of St Helena and Ascension Island. Now, they were either passengers on MV Hondius or they were contacts, perhaps medical staff who had contact with them. Now, they're being brought here to self-isolate, and this officials saying this is very much a precautionary measure because none of these people are currently exhibiting any kind of symptoms. They are being brought here because, essentially, if they do get unwell, they will have access to the specialist medical care that they will need. Now, in the meantime, as we've been saying, these clinical assessments and testing on 20 British nationals, a German UK resident and a Japanese national, all of whom were passengers on this ship, it's well underway. In fact, it's nearly coming to an end. It was a 72-hour period of isolation at Arrow Park Hospital. They are now being sent home and they are expected to self-isolate there for 42 days because of this long incubation period of Hantavirus. Now, just to read on the MV Hondius ship. The World Health Organization say that there are 11 confirmed and probable cases that they have found, and the evacuation and repatriation of these 150 passengers and crew took place at the beginning of this week. Now, some people had been saying to the WHO that we should be keeping everyone on the ship, but they were saying that that would have been inhumane because some of these passengers were suffering from mental breakdown, understandably, an extremely frightening situation. Health officials here, though, are very keen to stress that this is under control. They say they have robust arrangements in place and there is currently no sign of any larger outbreak.
Great stuff. Thank you.
Well, let's return, shall we now, to our top story. Pressure, of course, on Keir Starmer at number 10, so the moment of deep peril has passed. But also, of course, all eyes ahead to the King's speech that is going to take place later today. The Paymaster General and Cabinet Office Minister Nick Thomas-Symonds joins us now.
Good morning, Sophie.
Great to have you with us. We get a lot of flack as journalists about focusing on personality, not policy. So I did actually want to start on the King's speech because, you know, this is your kind of big legislative moment. What policies should we be looking out for in particular today?
Well, obviously, for me personally, in the King's speech, as a minister, I'll be piloting bills around, for example, removing titles from disgraced peers. I'll also be piloting through the Commons as well our European Partnership Bill, which is going to be about implementing in our domestic law our new agreement with the European Union. That's about taking down trade barriers, particularly in areas of food and drink, but also work in energy as well. And the message that I'm going to be pushing through, the legislation I'm going to be pushing through, is going to be about bearing down on bills, bearing down on people's food bills, bearing down on people's energy bills, but also about creating jobs, particularly renewable jobs in the North Sea, and trying to take away from businesses red tape. You know, if you go back since 2023, we've had businesses across the country having to pay what are known as these export health certificates that they have to get in order to export to the European Union. Over 1 million of them have been issued to UK businesses at a cost of up to £200 apiece. Now, that's just one example, but that's the kind of red tape, the kind of cost that I want to take away from businesses. So that's what I'll be piloting through the Commons, absolutely focused on the cost of living.
Now, you're a historian of the Labour Party, right? So you'll know, kind of, in many ways, the intellectual birthplace of the party was Wales. You know, Niall Bevan, Keir Hardie. You know, the party whose kind of heart was forged in these working-class communities, in the choirs, in the steelworks. You were devastated in Wales last week. How much of a hammer blow was that for you?
Oh, there was a devastating result. There's no hiding from that. And I think I felt it very personally. I had a very close friend, in fact, who in a year you would ordinarily have expected him to have been elected to the Senedd and wasn't elected. Of course, that was very difficult. I'm not denying that. Looking at it, we'd been in power in Wales in the devolution age for 27 years. We'd governed from 1999 to 2026. And looking forward now, we have obviously a much smaller group in the Senedd, but we've just chose a new interim leader of Welsh Labour in Ken Skates to lead us forward.
And guess what I'm trying to get at here, though, is that for many people, given the history of Labour in Wales, this is the symbol of Labour losing that connection with its roots, of what it's about as a party. You understand, obviously, but you get what I'm saying?
Well, I was knocking on doors an awful lot during the campaign, as you can imagine, both locally and in Wales. And what was coming up to me on the doorstep was a range of things, particularly you had both the Welsh Government having been in power for so long, obviously around the UK Government as well. People were talking about the need for change. They didn't feel they were seeing that change quickly enough in their communities. There was some doubt as to whether people felt having over many years not just the last 2 years having been let down by the promise of change. Would that change ever come? And that was coming through to me very strongly on the doorsteps when I was out speaking to people.
And do you believe, you know, kind of in your kind of quiet moments, hand on heart, that Keir Starmer is the man who can win back Wales and who can also win back, you know, Sunderland, you know, Swindon, or these places that have turned away from Labour? Do you believe that he is the man?
I do believe that, and I believe that because I think it is about delivery. It is about actually delivering that change in the community. And I know how determined, I was talking to the Prime Minister only last night, actually, I know how determined he is to deliver that change people can see and feel in their communities.
Does he want to fight the next election? You know, you talk to him a lot.
Yes, and I was speaking to him last night, in fact, and I went round to see him, actually, in Downing Street last night. He was in a very determined mood and very determined...
So he wants to fight the next election, then? He does?
The Prime Minister absolutely wants to deliver on the mandate that he was given in 2024. He said that a number of times, and to fight the next election. Yes, just to be absolutely clear on your question. And he is somebody who... He's very resilient. He's probably one of the most resilient people that I've ever met. But he also has that absolute commitment to deliver the change that people voted for nearly 2 years ago now.
We're in a moment of peril, I think it's fair to say. I'm going back to that kind of famous Lyndon B. Johnson quote about the first rule of politics is knowing how to count.
Learn how to count, indeed.
Yeah. Does West Streeting have the numbers?
Well, it would appear from what I saw, and it was... Look, yesterday was turbulent. I'm not hiding from that. But it didn't appear on what I saw yesterday that there was the 81 numbers that are required around a single candidate, which is what our party leadership rules require. There evidently, though, isn't a consensus either about even having a leadership contest. There was obviously well over 100 MPs yesterday saying that's not what they wanted.
But that's the point. That's just to come out, because that is kind of the problem as well. You know, if we're going back to the learning how to count thing, you've got 100 people saying they want Keir Starmer to say, but, you know, that's 300 who didn't sign that letter. That's, you know, it's not great, is it?
Well, but it's also because, frankly, you've got people who are members of the government as well who don't tend to sign the round-robin letters. But, look, in terms of going
a couple
forward...
of people who said that they didn't sign it and their names were put on the list as well. I mean, it wasn't a great show of strength, if that's what you were hoping for, was it?
Well, I think what we have seen in recent days, though, and looking at that turbulence, is a sense, and this is the way I see it, that to listen to the message of the public, it is not to turn inwards, it is to look outwards. Yes, to listen, reflect, treat the result with humility last week in the message that was sent to us. And what we have to do is to take on board what was said about that frustration that change is not being felt in people's communities, go back, get on with it, roll our sleeves up and deliver that change.
Someone who is, I think, fair to say, quite rooted in the community is Andy Burnham. Do you think he should be allowed to return to Westminster?
Well, first of all, Andy Burnham, I've been working very closely with Andy Burnham over the past 2 years. I've been working with him particularly on delivering the Hillsborough Law. I was speaking to him only a couple of weeks ago. Actually, I think he's doing an absolutely fantastic job as the Mayor of Greater Manchester. Just like the Prime Minister, I think he has a mandate from the people of Greater Manchester. Specifically on Westminster, that's an issue for the National Executive Committee. I'm not a member of it rather than for me, but I think he's been doing an absolutely fantastic job.
I mean, come on, you know, I wasn't born yesterday. You know, the National Executive Committee looks at what the leader of the party is saying, looks at what people like you are saying as well. It's not like it's this, like, wholly, you know, completely separate process, is it, right?
Well, they look at all the circumstances, just as they did last time, as they always do. It's, as I say, a matter for them. I'm not treading into them.
Do you think he should be able to come back to Westminster?
That's a matter both for the National Executive Committee and then later, obviously, for the electorate of any particular seat. I mean, there's lots of rumours swirling around about this. I've not heard any particular vacancy that's arising.
So you don't think there's a seat for him, even if he wanted it?
Well, I've no idea as of today. I'm not aware of any seat as of today that is available. But the point that I'm just making is I think Andy is a fantastic Mayor of Greater Manchester, and I've known him for many, many years, and I work extremely well with him. ...
And he should stay there?
No, it's the point that I'm making is it's a matter for the NEC as to who are the candidates in our elections. But Andy is doing a great job. I like working with him very much.
OK, thank you very much. Always good to have you on the programme. Nick Thomas-Symonds speaking to us there. Coming up next, we're going to be talking to some union voices, always a huge part, of course, of the Labour story, particularly on weeks like this. That's coming up.
we're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting. The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming. It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Welcome back. We just heard, of course, the case for the Prime Minister from his Cabinet Office Minister, Nick Thomas-Symonds. Now let's speak to an organisation that wants him to stand down. We're joined now by Mariam Eslam-Douse, the General Secretary of the Trade Union Transport Salaried Staffs Association. Thanks so much for joining us. You want the PM to stand down?
Yes, I do. I spent days speaking to campaigning for Labour councillors on the doorstep. I spoke to voters who had previously voted Labour, who made it incredibly clear that they were turning against us on a whole range of issues, notwithstanding Gaza, restrictions on the right to protests, fears around ID cards. There's a real sense amongst progressive voters that Labour is no longer listening to them.
In terms of what you want to see next, do you have a clear idea of who you want to take over?
Well, we have to see who puts their hat into the ring. I don't want to speculate, but the kind of leader I think would serve Labour voters well and the unions is someone that is serious about growing the economy, about protecting jobs, and who has real answers to the cost of living crisis. Ultimately, we need someone who represents working people and who isn't afraid to listen to progressive voices and champion their causes.
Clearly, it's oversimplifying things a little bit. But there's the chance that the next leader is more to the right or more to the left of Keir Starmer. Do you ever pause and think, be careful what we wish for? We might not get the kind of direction of travel that we want. It might get worse.
I think that the current situation is chaos. We need a change. We need a change in policy direction. We need a change on political strategy, and we need a change of leader. On policy, people want to see a government that tackles the cost of living crisis, whether they're right or left. It doesn't matter. We need someone that takes disabled people seriously, who doesn't go after poor pensioners or struggling families to pay the price of growing the economy. We want change.
Could that be from Wes Streeting?
Wes Streeting wouldn't be my choice. I'm sure he has his supporters. We're looking for, the trade union movement are looking for someone that offers the Labour unions a vision that we can rally around. For me, that choice isn't Wes Streeting.
So again, I just asked to pause, and you would prefer Keir Starmer to Wes Streeting?
I didn't say that. I said we need a change in policy direction. I don't think Wes Streeting would be that change in policy direction. He'd definitely be a change in leader. I'm seeking both a change in policy direction and leader.
Just finally, as we kind of pause and, focus on the King's speech coming up today and all of the sort of craziness of the last few days, what if nothing is resolved by the end of this week? At that point, do you think we need to get on with the job at hand and not draw this out further for your members? Or is a line drawn? Is there no coming back from your union, yourself, your members wanting a change of leader?
think the dire election results are something to be taken really seriously. The electorate has rejected the Labour Party, the Labour brand under Keir Starmer's premiership. Look, there's been a series of completely avoidable controversies, whether it's the Mandelson saga, rows over donations, free clothes. The wider public perception is that the government is disconnected from ordinary people's lives. There has to be a change because trust has broken down and we can't continue down this path.
Mariam, thanks so much.
You know, it is worth reflecting just how important voices like that, you know, union voices, are going to be for what develops over the days and weeks ahead. Not just the MPs, we need to be looking at them.
Absolutely. Let's have a look at the weather next.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
A northerly flow will bring cold air and widespread showers over the next few days, but there's still no sign of any proper rain in the south. That's OK for us in the south, I have to say. But it is chilly out there, though, mostly frost-free. Expect plenty of blustery showers this morning with a few brighter spells in between. Heavy showers will bring the risk of hail and thunder, especially in the north and east. The far southwest of both England and Ireland has the best chance of being dry. It will be chilly with a brisk wind, making it feel even colder, but north-eastern Britain looks calmer.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Now, we're going to break away from politics for a moment and talk about the British Book Awards, because some very interesting books were recognised. Among them, a memoir, which makes serious claims about what goes on behind the scenes at Meta, the owner of Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp. Careless People was written by the whistleblower Sarah Wynne-Williams. She's not allowed to speak about the book due to a US court order obtained by Meta. But she was at the awards, and in this clip we're about to play, you can see her standing silently next to the book's editor, who spoke about it on her behalf.
We often think of the threat to free expression as coming from authoritarian states or government censors, but Careless People has shown us the terrifying reality of a new breed of corporate censorship.
That was Mike Harpley, who joins us now. And when the court order was issued, a Meta spokesperson, Andy Stone, shared a link to it on X and said this ruling affirms that Sarah Wynne-Williams' false and defamatory book should never have been published. Mike, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you.
Very nice to be here. Thank you.
Before we get into some of the details of this, and we wanted to mention, so our viewers are fully aware, we're not able to discuss the contents of the book, so our viewers should be aware that they won't be coming up. What role did she have at Meta? Was she junior, senior? Was she close to the leadership?
She was a director of a global director of public policy there, so she was close to the leadership and working. She was there from 2011 to 2017 and worked very closely with Mark Zuckerberg, Sheryl Sandberg, Joel Kaplan, who's number 2 there at the moment. So basically, her role was, I suppose, almost acting as a diplomat within Facebook and representing them, and that was her role. Yep.
So she was senior and knew what was going on, I guess, is the key point. Why? Just explain for us, why are you here rather than her? How is she restricted exactly?
Well, upon publication, I think it was the eve of our publication, Meta obtained a legal order in the States that prevents her from either promoting her book or saying anything negative about Meta. And that extends, is sort of a very draconian order, and extends to even her talking to her family in private as well. So sort of, as a publisher, I've never dealt with anything like this before, and it obviously put us in a strange position. But clearly the book has done well, even.
And well, no, the thing I was going to ask, which I'm genuinely confused about, is obviously this is based on a US court order. I'm not a legal scholar in the UK either, but odd to be in a place where the book can come out, but she can't talk about it.
Yes. Well, I think usually when these kind of things happen, there's some kind of defamation. The person who thinks there's false or defamatory statements would sue the publisher and the author to try and get damages, where in this case they went specifically after her, which is a new and sort of novel way of trying to prevent a book's publication. But the order was specifically against her, not against us. So we could go ahead and publish it, but obviously we're in the strange position of having a book without an author.
And it's interesting, almost from there's bigger issues at hand, but almost from a sort of strategy point on their part, if they know that the book is coming out either way, it might actually, has it helped your book sales?
Well,
marginally, that there's all this going. This is a part of the story. It's
I'm sure
an award-winning part of the story.
It has been part of the story, and certainly been. I mean, we've had to make it part of our campaign because we haven't been able to sort of put our author in front of journalists. So I think it has played a part, but the sort of the writing, as the book awards sort of testified, the writing and the contents are so strong. I think it would have been a big bestseller anyway, but clearly it hasn't harmed us that they have sought to restrict it coming out, because clearly that shows that there's something in there worth reading if they're trying to stop it.
And why now? I think you said she had this senior role 2011 to 2017. Why now?
Well, I don't know. I would say that it's a huge decision for her to make. I mean, she knew that there were going to be consequences for publishing this, I think, and for telling her story. So I think it's been probably percolating, and she's been thinking about it for a long time. She thinks there are very important public interest issues that she wanted to discuss in the book. But equally, you don't take this lightly, I think. I mean, you can see what's happened to her since the book's come out. So if she says anything negative about Meta, she's subject to, for each individual statement, a potential fine of $50,000, and that could quickly add up to millions of dollars. So, I mean, she knew, I think, when she wrote it, that this wasn't going to be an easy process for her, but she's incredibly principled and has done so anyway. So I think that's the case.
Just finally, when you see big tech as a whole in the US, and leaders associated with big tech as a whole talk about the importance of free speech.
Yeah.
How does it make you feel?
Well, I think it is a breathtaking irony. I suppose, particularly with reference to this book, it feels like they want free speech when it applies to them, when it's convenient to them, but not when it's used to hold them accountable to things.
Mike, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Congrats on the Books Award. Mike Harpley there, the editor of Careless People. We will be talking more about the pressure on the Prime Minister next.
Over there, to your left. There have been airstrikes every day. Hezbollah are very sensitive about us showing any pictures, and we're being hurried away right now. It felt akin to riding into some sort of Armageddon. Many other areas have been hit badly. There are shells coming in every few minutes. Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city, where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford, and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. It's trying to hit us. That's it. It got us then. There's a lot of action going on. A lot of hits still. We were the first journalists and the only outsiders to reach the site of the attack several weeks after it happened.
We found from the missile.
It's very difficult to see what around here could be conceived of as a legitimate military target.
Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, a boat seriously overcrowded.
This is one of the most severe viruses in the world. Clearly not had very much to eat at all, a lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine How much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake? Whoa!
Getting up close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
The cameras are poised here, there, everywhere.
The day those present would never forget.
First question, Sky News.
Do you hate the thought of losing to him?
I hate the thought of losing to anyone.
Historic day here today.
They are pushing forward.
They dash to the water.
Wait, what country are you
From the UK?
Why don't you go back to your country?
Huge questions to be grappled with.
That is totally unprecedented.
Been quite some day.
Let me start with breaking news.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching.
Good to see you again. How are you?
Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
Welcome back. Well, let's bring you more now, shall we, on our top story. The Prime Minister expects to hold talks with the House Secretary Wes Streeting. These calls, of course, persistent calls for him to step down. Number 10 think they've got a bit of breathing space. They think that Wes Streeting doesn't have the numbers. And we're going to find out after the firebreak, I guess, of the King's speech.
Yeah, they've got a bit of breathing space because of the conveniently scheduled King's speech as well. Let's talk about all of this with the General Secretary of the Trade Union Prospect, Mike Clancy. Very good morning to you, Mike. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Do you have a clear view on whether or not the Prime Minister should step aside?
So Prospect doesn't affiliate to the Labour Party, and our view is that that's a matter for the Labour Party to make a decision. What I've been talking about is the consequences of all of this. The focus has been upon the Prime Minister. But if we see this change, what does it mean for government? What does it mean for who's going to be the next Chancellor? Who's going to be the next Defence Secretary? Who's going to be the next Business Secretary? And all of this commentary has been all about the actual Prime Minister. But the consequences for government, the consequences for working people of this change is huge. And there's not been enough conversation yet about that. I think what we've seen last week is a barometer where people don't like anything about politics presently. They probably feel let down by politics in general. And it might be best to take stock and take a little bit of time just to understand about how people are feeling after the elections last week. So my message is, well, how does government continue through this? The government's done some things that are right from the trade union movement's viewpoint, and particularly in terms of the Employment Rights Act. But we're going to lose 6 months, 8 months or more as the government works out who wants to lead it and what the consequences are for the country. So my voice is about calm. It's about let's just take stock and what was last week really telling us about how people are feeling in this country.
I mean, I think you're completely right to say the thing that matters is how this is impacting people at a time that's already really, really difficult. But I guess there's two ways of looking at it. You can either look at it through the lens of this is really not working, we need to change the leader, look at the message, right? Or you can look at it through the lens of a leadership contest is a total distraction because it stops people from governing and it gets Labour to look inward. I don't know if you have a view on those two positions.
Well, look, the civil service will keep government going no matter what. The people I represent, which are in strategically important industries, need a government that's focused upon the policy issues of the day, whether that be energy, whether that be defence, whether it be the future of our creative industries. And what I think I fear is a 6 or 8 month period which we can't afford to lose government having focus. And that's before you get to the geopolitical issues. And that's before we get to the big questions of our relationship with Europe. So if we're going to go into this, the problem will be that whoever wins are going to be faced with the question of, well, you wanted this, what are you going to do, what are your answers? So in all of this, the leadership contenders which may emerge, or the alternative political voices that exist, what are their answers? Now, I think what we've seen, is a 10 or more year period of big shocks from 2008 through the coalition period, through the Brexit decision that the country made, then into COVID, then into a cost of living crisis. It's probably no surprise that working people are feeling very much dislocated from politics. And whoever takes the reins here, or if we changed entirely after the next election, who's going to give us the answers? So I think one of my concerns is that currently, from very mixed results last Thursday, where there were both left and right and centre indicators about how people are feeling about their politics. It might be time for the Westminster bubble just to calm and take stock.
You're talking to
and ask themselves some questions.
So what's a key policy change that you think people want to see? Forget the leaders, forget the parties. What haven't we done for years, not just under this government, that we should and could do?
Well, actually, this government is on the right track in terms of the labour market. It's very important that people are able to go to work, have secure employment and have reasonable pay packages at the end of it. Labour's trying to re-regulate the labour market. This won't lead to business not being able to make profits. It won't lead to business needing to fly out the country. What people are crying out for is secure jobs and a voice at their workplace. So I would say that Labour's on the right lines with their Employment Rights Act. They do need to take business with them. It's very important that this has landed well. And this is a really good example. If we lose 6 or 8 months this year, whilst the Employment Rights Act hit the statute book in December 25, 26 is all about implementation. It's all about making it happen and making it happen in a way that works for working people and for business. If government has got its eye off the ball and spends its time looking inward at its own political factions, we will lose this opportunity. And actually, I think that's one of the main things that does come out of the last few years. People don't want to feel insecure at work, whether they're in direct employment, whether they're in self-employment. I represent a lot of people who are self-employment, people who make these great programmes. So I think Labour needs to stick with that policy, and they need to see that through. And to do so, they need calm, functioning government.
I know you didn't want to be explicit at the top, but what you're very clearly implying there is you want no change. You want the government to get on with the job at hand and not to have a leadership battle.
I don't see any Labour candidates wanting to step away from the policy position of delivering the employment rights successfully. That will be, I think, a running feature of all of them. What I want to see is the Labour Party in government take a calm look at the fact that it's got a responsibility to the people who voted it into power just over two years ago, and to focus upon whether a change in leadership, if that's what they want to achieve, is going to actually lead to any of that manifesto delivery happening over the next few years. Other political parties and prospect members vote across the political spectrum. That's why we don't affiliate. I sometimes say it's because we can therefore fall out with everybody, but actually it's about we can speak truth into power. I think at the present minute, the main message to Westminster is that actually there's a big dislocation across the political spectrum. You all need to calm, and you just need to think about representing the people who put you there in the first place. So I don't favour one candidate over another, but I do favour the focus on there is real consequences if you go down this route. Don't be delusional and think that it'll happen really quickly and everyone will calm down again, because, as I say, it's not just the Prime Minister, it's the Chancellor, it's the Business Secretary, it's the Defence Secretary, it's all that change. And what happens is the pace of government just stops. It slows down inevitably because you lose that laser focus on what you're trying to deliver.
Thank you. It's interesting. I think an awful lot of people watching will probably agree with what you say there about, worried about the bottom line, worried about their jobs, don't want to be worrying about what's going on with the Westminster bubble as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now, the boss of OpenAI has taken a stand as part of a courtroom showdown involving some of big tech's most influential figures. Sam Altman, we're talking about here, is accused of turning OpenAI into a for-profit business, breaking its founding vision of being a charitable enterprise. Altman denies allegations, claiming they're driven partly by jealousy.
So the person making the allegations is one Elon Musk, who co-founded OpenAI. He was questioned in court, and Altman alleged that Elon Musk supported the idea of the company becoming for-profit and even tried to take control of it, suggesting OpenAI should pass to his children when he dies.
This court case has captured America and the business community because of the number of unbelievably high-profile people having to go on the record. We had Satya Nadella of Microsoft the other day. The only thing I'd just switch in our script there, it's not alleged that OpenAI went from not-for-profit, from a charity to a profit enterprise. It was, and this has also shone the spotlight on that. So whoever comes out worse, and I think that is the question here, not who comes out better, who's coming out worse, it is a stark reminder of an extraordinary shift, which is one of the most important technologies of our time, was originally being developed in a not-for-profit for the good of humanity, OpenAI, and that was changed.
Yeah, it's a big
Whether Elon Musk or Sam Altman deserves more of the pie that came out of it, and I think everyone's greed is being advertised loud and clear from this, you can't hide away from the fact that that happened.
Yeah, and that is something that could have enormous consequences as well, right? Really interesting stuff. Coming up, we, of course, are going to return to our top story. We still don't know what time Wes Streeting and Keir Starmer are meeting, by the way, despite our best attempts, but we'll try and find you all the details as soon as it happens.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
Good morning, it is 8 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Rich and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf, a very good morning from me as well.
The Prime Minister prepares for a showdown as his key cabinet rival Wes Streeting heads to Downing Street.
Keir Starmer will hope to seize back control with the King's speech ahead today.
Donald Trump flies to China to meet Xi Jinping and says Iran will be on the agenda.
Also today, the former First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, will be here to talk about her work with refugee families and perhaps a little bit else.
And UK health officials have announced plans to allow quarantined Brits to return home after the Hantavirus outbreak. Good morning, welcome to the programme. Keir Starmer may have survived a near impossible day yesterday, but his hold on the Labour Party remains under threat.
Well, this morning, the Prime Minister will meet his mooted leadership rival, the Health Secretary Wes Streeting, in Downing Street. The meeting takes place just hours before the King's speech, where the government's agenda for the year ahead will be laid out.
It's fast-moving. Look, yesterday morning on Downing Street, it felt like things were about to tip over the edge. When we were told by number 10 the agenda for Cabinet was going to focus on international affairs, we didn't believe it. But that is exactly what Keir Starmer did. In perhaps the most Keir Starmer move ever, he was actually saved by process. So he told Cabinet that if anyone wanted to raise his leadership, they could see him afterwards, one-on-one, and then didn't meet them. So now this morning, number 10 are spinning that the moment of peril is over. They say Wes Streeting doesn't have the numbers, Burnham doesn't have a seat. But are those two things true? Well, this morning, Wes Streeting is finally going to get his meeting with the Prime Minister. Will he ask the PM to set out a timetable for his exit? Will he resign? Will he launch a leadership bid? Who knows? But in truth, today might not be the day that Streeting acts, because it's the King's speech later this morning, a big set-piece event. Wes Streeting and others, they're not going to want to derail the King, right? And that all means that Keir Starmer might have some time. He's saying he's going nowhere. The rebels don't have the numbers. Now, Lyndon B. Johnson says the first rule of politics is learning to count. And we're going to find out soon who has done their sums right. But first, just listen to what a key Keir Starmer ally told us earlier about the fact he wants to continue to fight the election.
I was speaking to him last night, in fact, and I went round to see him, actually, in Downing Street last night. He was in a very determined mood and very determined...
So he wants to fight the next election, then? He does?
The Prime Minister absolutely wants to deliver on the mandate that he was given in 2024. He said that a number of times, and to fight the next election. Yes, just to be absolutely clear on your question. And he is somebody who... He's very resilient. He's probably one of the most resilient people that I've ever met. But he also has that absolute commitment to deliver the change that people voted for nearly 2 years ago now.
Let's go to Downing Street. Ali is there for us. Ali, is he there yet? Do we know if he's going to come in through the front door and allow you to scream questions at him?
Well, Wilf, the reason I was just looking down as you come to me is because I'm desperately trying to find out whether or not he has been into Downing Street, whether he's going to appear. Is he going to show his face on Downing Street? Is he going to go through the back door? There's every possibility he's been in and out already. I'm not sure if that is the case. I suspect we might see him on Downing Street. It is no coincidence that Wes Streeting is having what's been called a coffee with the Prime Minister. He tried to speak to him after the Cabinet meeting yesterday. We understand that didn't happen. The Prime Minister didn't meet with him then, so he's meeting with him now amidst an extraordinary context. You talk there, the King's speech, a moment the government's meant to set out its clear legislative agenda, but instead we have 87 plus now MPs saying that the Prime Minister should go openly calling for the Prime Minister to no longer carry on in that job. 100 plus saying he should stay. A split right down the middle of the Labour Party, and questions about whether we will see more ministerial, even Cabinet resignations. So Wes Streeting, a key figure, seen to be someone who could be in an advantageous position should he go early for the leadership. His allies have long said that he is not plotting, but he is planning in the event that a vacancy becomes available, seen to be on the right of the party. That he's left recently on a few issues like Gaza and welfare. He is going to be talking to the Prime Minister about what is it going to be a climb down. Allies of Wes Streeting suggest that it's not going to be a climb down as such. Will he be setting out what he thinks his vision for the country is? Will he be resigning? Will he be saying that he's going to run for the leadership? We don't know, but what I think we do know is that the King's speech seems to have set some sort of reprieve for the Prime Minister. I think no one wants to interrupt that historic tradition. The King, of course, set in the next couple of hours to head to Parliament. That, I think, is something, well, what I know that Wes Streeting's allies have told me is something that they do not want to interrupt. So I don't think we will be hearing from Wes Streeting immediately after this meeting, but this sets up what is still an extraordinary week, and I think what is still a perilous position for the Prime Minister, despite his allies coming out and saying that we're moving on, everything's OK. This is going to be a very difficult week for the PM.
Yeah, it certainly is. And it's interesting, isn't it? You've almost got like a kind of fire break of the King's speech in the middle of it all.
Conveniently.
Yeah, it is honestly, it is kind of convenient to us in a way. Ali, I just wanted to ask you about something that Nick Thomas-Symonds told us earlier. Key ally of the Prime Minister, right? They're friends. He said Keir Starmer wants to fight the next election. And I'll be honest, I was quite surprised that he went that far, given the fact that Keir Starmer's comments to The Observer that he wanted 10 years in power made MPs react in the way that they did.
I thought that was really fascinating, and contrast, Sophie, the tone of Darren Jones yesterday, where he was saying effectively the Prime Minister was weighing up his future, calling it a sad day, and Nick Thomas-Symonds there defiant, saying the PM's going to fight the next election. And I think that tells you what the government, the change in position we've seen in the last 24 hours. The Prime Minister is going to fight this. He had that cabinet meeting yesterday. He effectively did the John Major thing of saying put up or shut up, and no one has put up yet. So they are going to try to limp on. And look, we are not in the territory we were when I was standing on Downing Street and we were seeing ministers in Boris Johnson's cabinet and below resigning at the speed at which he was appointing them, and government basically became unable to function. We're not at that stage right now. They're reappointing those ministers that have gone. They're getting on with government business. But you have to ask how long the Prime Minister can limp on when you have a number of MPs, more than 80, which is above the threshold that could cause him trouble, could defeat parliamentary legislation, and so many tricky things coming up on immigration, on send, on jury trials. How is he going to be able to command the majority in the House? How is he going to be able to get that legislation through? And of course, 80 plus is a number that would need to rally behind one leadership candidate. So I struggle to see how the next few days will play out. We've seen Prime Ministers cling on before, but ultimately, whether it comes to their party or the electorate, they get chucked out. And is that what we're going to see today or in the months ahead with Keir Starmer?
Ali, great stuff. Thanks so much. We should mention now, of course, bond markets are open. The borrowing costs in the UK haven't risen again today. They've eased marginally, 5.06%. The borrowing cost in the UK 10-year yesterday had risen above 5.1%. But nonetheless, all of this uncertainty in the last week has pushed up UK borrowing costs noticeably more than movements in other markets. And Ed Conway now breaks down why the UK is so exposed.
Well, we seem to be back on the roller coaster again, and once again looking at charts like this. This is showing you the UK government bond yield. It's the cost of borrowing for the UK government, but it kind of affects all of us as well. It was around about 5% just last week. Then, of course, we had the local election results, and kind of after that, it started to push up. But the thing that's really sparked the latest increase is all of that leadership speculation that's been happening in the past 24 hours, and you can see how it went up really sharply. Then the Prime Minister came out and said, look, I'm staying. And as a result, it's kind of settled around about there, 5.1%. But it's worth just putting that into a bit of historical perspective. So 5.1%, this is the UK government 10-year government bond yield going back to 2008. And just for some context, that's 2022. That's the mini budgets. That spike there. Well, as you can probably see, look, we are higher now than we have been since 2008 when it comes to UK government borrowing rates. And that's basically the market casting its judgment on the UK. And why are they doing that? Well, we'll come on to kind of the government side of it in a moment. But partly it's because, we have really high inflation in the UK, and obviously we're facing this energy price shock. And even before the energy price shock, this is showing you the average rate of inflation across other G7 nations. Here's what's striking. Look at the UK. That's the red line here. Look at where we are in relation to the rest. We used to be kind of middle of the pack, or kind of around about kind of average. And now we're above. We're kind of an outlier when it comes to inflation. And that's before this shock that is coming our way in terms of inflation. So there's an inflation worry. And then on top of that, there's a fiscal worry. And what's that? It's basically the government has a lot of challenges right now, OK? And when you look at public spending, OK, that's that line there, as a percentage of GDP going all the way back to the 1940s, it is really high, OK? So the amount of public spending right now, just, again, to show you some context, OK, it is at the kind of level, we've only seen a few times where it's been higher than it is right now. COVID in 2020, the financial crisis in 2008, in the 1970s, and the oil price shock. That's not very flattering when it comes to comparisons of public spending, and yet that's kind of where we're heading to at the moment. So public spending is high, and so too are taxes. If you look at taxes as a percentage of GDP, the total tax burden, that is also heading up to the highest level basically ever, certainly since the 1940s, and in the coming years, maybe even higher still. So taxes are going up, spending is high, and at the same time, look down here, this is debt interest, so that's the debt that we're kind of paying 5% or more on right now. Even before that, it was at the highest level, or one of the highest levels that we've seen in recent history. So put that all together, and people are wondering, OK, how are you going to sort that out? And the short answer is you need a strong government to be able to kind of deal with challenges like that. And that's kind of what it looked like Keir Starmer had. He had this stonking majority back in the last election, 411 MPs voted through, a landslide. But of course, he hasn't been able to sort that out. And now people are looking at the polling, people out there in markets, looking at the polling, looking at what we saw in local elections. And what does that show you? Well, here's our kind of projection based on the national equivalent vote share. It shows there's potentially a hung parliament, or a chance of a hung parliament, and no majority. And that makes it even more difficult to deal with all these deep-seated problems that the UK has, which is why we're facing so much financial fallout.
It's interesting, isn't it, the fallout? I mean, it's going to be so decisive as well. It feels like Labour MPs have learned to look at how those markets are responding. Do you think they'll take a bit of heart this morning then, or...?
38 basis points of heart? Not really. I mean, we're still above... we crossed a high on the 30-year not seen since 1998. We're still basically there at that high. So it's not getting worse today, but the moves, I think, were clear over the last few days.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, let's see what is going on, shall we, with the leadership contest. An awful lot of things flying around this morning. We can talk now to Neil Duncan-Jordan, who is one of the Labour MPs who wants to see the Prime Minister step down. So just talk us through what your thinking is on the situation. Why do you think Keir Starmer needs to go?
Good morning. I mean, I've been calling for the Prime Minister to go since November, so I'm not a newcomer to this. And the reason why I've said that is because when you knock on the doors and consistently residents tell you that they would vote Labour, but not when Keir Starmer is the leader, you then have to sort of come to the conclusion that if he's the block, then he has to go. And I think the evidence of last Thursday's election results show how unpopular he is. I've heard other colleagues say as well, he was unpopular before we got elected. I mean, we got elected because we were an antidote to the 14 years of Tory chaos and austerity, and people thought we would be different. Even though they perhaps didn't like Keir Starmer, they thought, well, the Labour government will at least deliver. And I think the problem is that we haven't done enough of that, and now his unpopularity and the failure to deliver combine to make a set of disastrous election results.
Would you rather Wes Streeting?
I personally wouldn't rather Wes Street. I don't know if you would, but I mean, my personal view is that we need a orderly transition over a decent length of time, and we need candidates from across the party spectrum to be able to stand, and that includes Andy Burnham, in my view, and others. I think we need a range of views. Where we've got to in recent years in the Labour Party is a very small group of people choosing each other to be in charge, and I don't think that served us particularly well. We've got a lot of talent in the Labour Party.
Well, apart from Jeremy Corbyn, I mean, you can't really say that, can you? Jeremy Corbyn was from the left, wasn't he?
Yeah, but we're not talking about them. We're talking about now. You're asking me about the candidates that would come forward now, and I'm saying to you, I think we need an orderly process. So no resignations tomorrow or anything like that. That's ridiculous. Your item earlier was about stability in the markets. I absolutely understand that. That's why you need an orderly process to sort that out. And that would give the stability if people could see that this was being done properly, not rushed, not a quick fix, but a proper approach to getting a new Prime Minister.
You say that you'd like Andy Burnham to be part of that race. Of course, the issue he's got is he doesn't have a seat. Are you looking around at your colleagues? Does someone need to step up and give him a seat?
So looking at colleagues, that's for them to decide. And I think Andy Burnham's team and others are in conversation with those people. My seat is in Dorset in Poole. He's certainly not going to come down there, is he? He's the king of the north. So, I mean, you need to look at people around that area to see if they are considering stepping down. I just think we can't have a coronation of one individual. That would be wrong. I think we need to give people a choice, a proper choice, and that means having people drawn from across the political spectrum inside the party's views.
Should there be a general election after a change of leader?
Well, that's the same question that you could have put to the Tories many times in the last Parliament. So, I mean, that's not how our constitution works. If people want to change that constitution, that's fine by me. We can have that debate, but that's not how it works at present. You could make the same argument, of course, that what about when people cross the House from one party to another? There's no obligation on them to step down, and they carry on, even though they weren't elected as that party's MP, they were elected under a different label. People do this all the time. I'm not saying it's right, it's just where our constitution is at the moment.
To be clear, we did pose that question
many
repeatedly.
Times. Yeah. Can I ask about Ed Miliband? The reason is because, look, there's an awful lot of people, I think, on the left of the party who want a change of leader, but you don't want to see Wes Streeting in. If there is a leadership contest more quickly than the one that you would like to see, could you stomach the idea of, I don't know, Ed Miliband coming back and leading the party?
Yesterday, a group of new 2024 intake MPs launched a new political programme called Socialism 26. This lays out 15 basic policies, 5 for the government to do now, 5 to be done by the end of Parliament, and 5 for our next manifesto offer. I'll look at any candidate who looks at those 15 policies and decides that some of them are for them to introduce. We've got to get away from it just being a beauty contest about personalities. We have to move this debate into not just changing the face on the tin, but changing the contents of the tin. And that means having a better policy direction than we've had in the last 20 months.
Neil, thanks so much for joining us. We enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.
Now, President Trump is on his way to Beijing, where he says that he'll ask Chinese President Xi Jinping to, in his words, open up China to US tech companies.
Speaking to reporters before he took off, the president confirmed, unsurprisingly, that Iran will be on the agenda.
What is your message to President Xi as it relates to the Iran war?
Well, I think, number one, we're going to have a long talk about it. I think he's been relatively good, to be honest with you. You look at the blockade, no problems. They get a lot of their oil from that area. We've had no problem, and he's been a friend of mine. He's been somebody that we get along with. And I think you're going to see that good things are going to happen.
Talk to our Asia correspondent Helen Ann Smith, who's in Beijing for us. Helen Ann, what are you expecting?
Look, Sophie, we're expecting all sorts, everything from trade to big geopolitics. But look, this summit is being billed as possibly the most important, the most consequential between the leaders of the US and China in a decade. And I don't think that's overblowing it, coming at this pretty volatile moment, the context, of course, the war in Iran, and just sort of spiralling competition between the two that we've seen over the last year. It is so important, say, everyone watching this, that they are able to find some sort of connection, find some way to stabilise, prevent situations where tensions spill over and things get potentially even quite dangerous. Look, we heard from President Trump on his plane. He is on the way here via Truth Social, of course. He wanted to make it clear that, contrary to what some media had been reporting, that a certain Jensen Huang is on the plane. Now, he matters because he's the CEO of NVIDIA, the US company that that design and manufacture these big, important, high-end semiconductor chips. China wants more access to those chips, so his presence really matters. But he also said that he wants China to open up, and that will be, quote, the very first request. But look, I think it's understandable that Trump's pointing towards those things because he wants to shift the narrative towards the trade and the tariffs, because to be honest, that's the easy bit. I think it's perfectly feasible that there will be some deals that suit both sides, really. Perhaps some purchases of soybeans and Boeing aircraft from the Chinese, perhaps the US giving Chinese companies more access to their markets. These things are quite easy to achieve. The much, much harder bits will be the geopolitics. Of course, the Iran war will come up, and it's not a particularly good position that Trump finds himself in, having to come to China, cap in hand, if you like, to ask them for their help with the Iranians, to pressure them to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And look, while the Chinese might want the strait reopening, they're not going to do it in a manner that just gives Trump what he wants on a platter, and they're going to do it in a way whereby they are seen as the power brokers. And look, in exchange, be in no doubt, they'll push for some of the things that they want. Most importantly, of course, the island of Taiwan. And look, while I don't think we're going to necessarily see some massive joint statement on that, this is the business of incremental changes, and be in no doubt the Chinese will be pushing and pushing and pushing, and they know that there will be more meetings probably between these two leaders later this year. I just want to leave you with this, just one thing that was quoted in the Chinese state media in the last day, and I think it gives you quite a good idea of where the CCP's head is at, where the Chinese government's head is at. It said this: attempting to deal with China from a position of strength is not a rational choice. What it's essentially saying is we as the Chinese cannot and will not be bullied. We are your equals. We're going to match strength with strength, and be in no doubt that will be the Chinese strategy heading into this summit.
Helen, great stuff. Looking forward to ongoing coverage as and when the President touches down. Let's get an update on the passengers who are travelling on that cruise ship hit by Hantavirus. You may remember the British passengers were isolating at Arrow Park Hospital in Merseyside. Well, now the UK Health Agency has said they are allowed to return home. Olivia's here to tell us the terms around it. Allow home but still isolate.
Well, allowed home, but very much the details on that are still pretty sketchy, and I'll come to that in a moment. But the latest news that we have got confirmation of is that 10 people from the UK overseas territories of St Helena and Ascension Islands are being brought here because they were passengers or either medical staff who treated passengers, and they're going to be self-isolating here. Officials very much saying that's a precautionary measure because they're currently not facing any kind of symptoms, but that if they do become unwell, if they're here, then they'll be able to get the emergency medical care that they need. Now, health officials have said that these 20 British nationals, the German UK resident and this Japanese passenger who have been in this Merseyside hospital, they say that the clinical assessments and testing of them is well underway. They have been there for 72 hours, but the UK Health Security Agency haven't confirmed to us this morning that they are actually now leaving hospital. So we're still not entirely sure what the plan is yet, but we will keep everybody updated as we hear it. Now, in the meantime, they will be expected to self-isolate for 42 days once they get home because...
Oh, Olivia, sorry, let's listen to Wes Streeting is arriving in Downing Street.
The Health Secretary there walking up the street to number 10. Interestingly, he's decided to do it in front of the cameras.
Are you going to resign?
Do you want to be our next Prime Minister?
Are you going to stand for leader?
Can you tell us what are you going to be asking the Prime Minister?
Wes Streeting tried to have his meeting with Keir Starmer yesterday after Cabinet. He said now was not the time. He's got it this morning, just before 8:30, that meeting there. Ali, I mean, we don't know what he's going to say, do we? But I guess we're not expecting anything particularly explosive ahead of the King's speech.
Yeah, I mean, why is Wes Streeting on Downing Street today? It is not a coincidence. Sorry, I'm slightly out of breath, I have to say, Sophie, because I just went to go get a cup of coffee for myself and the cameraman, and I saw Wes Streeting, so I don't know if you saw me running back in time, so if I am slightly out of breath, that is why.
We did,
Full disclosure, because we're on Downing Street for a long time, so we do need some sustenance.
And Ali, take a breather, because we're going to re-rack it. Let's watch again his arrival. Oh.
That was supposed to be Wes Streeting going up Downing Street.
Calm and decided to come in through the front door. Maybe that is to be expected, but looking calm and confident.
Yeah, Chris
Smile.
Mason just ducking out the shot there.
Do you want to be our next Prime Minister?
Are you going to stand for leader?
Can you tell us what are you going to be asking the Prime Minister?
I have to say, Ali, a lot of people can say we get too focused on all of these things. It's dramatic. It's unbelievably dramatic. You have the Prime Minister of this land facing off one-on-one to someone who, by all accounts, we basically know wants to knife him in the back, hypothetically. Oh, to be a fly on the wall on that conversation.
I mean, exactly, and we do not know what is in Wes Streeting's head. There were some reports that we might see a climb down in some sense from the Health Secretary. His allies suggesting that is not the case. So what does that mean? Does that mean that we're going to see him resign? Does that mean we're going to see him go for the leadership? I think what we will probably not see today is something that distracts from the King's speech. Allies of Wes Streeting say we won't be hearing from him after. He doesn't want to distract from what is obviously a big historic moment, the King's speech. He doesn't want to interrupt that pageantry and that big significant moment. But what does that mean? Is the Prime Minister going to be, is the Health Secretary going to be talking directly to the Prime Minister about what his concerns are? Is he going to be setting a time limit? I don't know exactly what's going to happen in that meeting. I didn't know whether he was going to come in the front door or the back door, because both Downing Street and those close to Wes have been pretty tight-lipped about what is being called a coffee. We know that Wes Streeting wanted to see the Prime Minister yesterday after Cabinet, after that moment when the Prime Minister effectively chose to try to push ahead, said what we heard from John Major, put up or shut up. If there are no people that actually want the leadership, what is there that he can't carry on to do? So I think that was the defiance that we saw, a kind of shift in tone yesterday from Number 10 and the Prime Minister. It is not a coincidence that Wes Streeting is in there right now after 80 plus MPs on the Prime Minister's own side have said they don't want him in the job.
Ali, I hope you got that coffee, because there's absolutely no way you're able to leave that live point until Wes Streeting's come out of the door behind you.
It was typical timing, wasn't it, Sophie? I thought I would just nip to the gates and grab a bit of sustenance. And yeah, I saw the ministerial car arrive and I got back as quickly as I could. But yeah, apologies if I was slightly out of breath. It was typical timing, wasn't it?
No, you're great, as always.
I think you'll be breathless when he comes out as well. Just in anticipation.
I'm not leaving this spot. I'm not leaving this spot again.
Ali, great stuff as always. Thanks so much.
The thing that I would say as well is that just as Wes Streeting's behind that door, we're getting two very conflicting, I guess, reports from kind of Team Wes, from Team Starmer about numbers, because it comes down to numbers now. Does Wes Streeting have the support needed to go over the top? And it might not become clear today because of that fire break, but we're hearing different things from different camps, and it's difficult to work it out at the minute.
After this short break, we're going to get the view of someone I'm very much looking forward to speaking to for a lot of reasons, including on this topic, but also for the campaigning she's doing for Safe Passage International. Nicola Sturgeon is next.
we're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting. The whole neighborhood has rallied around her. It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming. It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Well, in the last few moments, it's happened. Wes Streeting has entered Downing Street. He decided to walk right up to the front entrance
Prime Minister.
and take questions.
Can you tell us what are you going to be asking the Prime Minister?
I guess I'll rather face the wall of questions rather than take questions straight into number 10 for that meeting with the Prime Minister.
Which, to be a fly on the wall. I mean, I can't work out what I think the tone is. By the way, we've laid out the possibilities. No one thinks he's going to do anything this morning ahead of the King's speech, but obviously he could lay down the gauntlet to the Prime Minister and say, if you don't do X, Y, Z, I will resign later this week. The other flip side, we haven't talked about much, is the Prime Minister could say, you're fired. It's not expected, again, certainly not before the King's speech, but it's definitely not just going to be a friendly conversation about waiting lists right now.
No, it absolutely is not. We also know that Wes Streeting wanted to meet Keir Starmer and wanted to talk to Keir Starmer at Cabinet yesterday. He wasn't given the opportunity to do that. Today is his day, which I guess is clever politics from number 10 because they know that he can't do anything ahead of the King's speech because that would be disrespectful for the King. But we are going to find out whose briefing is right. We're going to find out that iron law of politics, who has got the numbers. Is it number 10 in Keir Starmer? Is it Wes Streeting and the Rebels? At the minute, it's unclear, genuinely, because of all the spin going around, but it is going to become clear by the end of the week.
Now, in all of the conversations that have been happening, there's been an interesting perspective from very senior figures on the Andy Burnham issue, whether or not Burnham should be allowed to return as an MP.
One view was from Harriet Harman, who just this weekend, of course, was asked by the Prime Minister to be a special envoy for women and girls. This is her on Sky's Electoral Dysfunction podcast.
Could it be that Keir Starmer could say, actually, we need all the people in Cabinet to be the very best people for the country, and that includes Andy Burnham, and I'm going to call him back in and he's going to be part of my government. If he can construct a sense that the Cabinet is there to support the Prime Minister to do the best for the country in very difficult circumstances, if he can really build that sense, then why on earth would he not have Andy Burnham as part of that?
Really interesting take there from Harriet Harman. Well worth subscribing to the Electoral Dysfunction podcast if you haven't done so already. Now, the Home Office's decision to suspend the right of refugees to bring their children and partners to the UK is being challenged in the High Court today. That challenge has been brought by Safe Passage International. It's a charity that's chaired by the former First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, who I'm delighted to say joins me now. A very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Lovely to be here.
Talk us through why you're challenging the government on this.
Well, the view of Safe Passage International, a charity that I'm delighted to be chairing now, is that the suspension of this policy is unlawful, and those arguments will be presented to the court today. You know, in short, this is a policy that allowed families that had been separated while fleeing war and persecution to be reunited. So it would allow parents who'd made it to the UK to bring partners or, more importantly, children to be with them here. And more than 90% of the people who used this route to refugee status here in the UK were women and children. So the suspension of that policy, which happened last September, means that there are many children separated from their parents, languishing in refugee camps or in unsafe conditions elsewhere. That's clearly bad for the welfare of children and for the well-being of families overall. When the policy was suspended in September, the suspension was said by the Home Office to be temporary. But here we are, 7, 8 months later, and there is no suggestion of what might take its place. It is an example of the inhumanity that sits at the heart of this government's approach to asylum, refugee status and immigration more generally.
Do you think that the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister are inhumane?
I think their policies are inhumane. There's a lot of concern, understandable concern, about small boats crossings. That's an issue that periodically dominates political debate in this country. But small boats crossings don't happen because governments are soft on asylum and immigration. They are what happen when there are no safe alternatives, when there's no way for people fleeing war, fleeing persecution, fleeing conditions that most of us simply couldn't imagine to get here safely. We live in a really unstable world. Unfortunately, it's a fact of life that population displacement is going to happen. Far better than governments trying to pull up the drawbridge, that governments work collectively to recognise their moral obligation and provide sanctuary and safety to people at some of the most precarious times of their lives.
It's a very compelling and legitimate point that I think a lot of people would argue with, would agree with. Sorry, in an ideal world, are we at a point economically where we're struggling to afford things, at a point where the numbers have been pretty high in recent years, where governments need to start to do things that, in an ideal world, they don't agree with? Maybe not the children point, again, but do you have to take some tough decisions?
I mean, of course, governments... Look, I know I led a government for the best part of a decade. I know how tough those decisions can be and how unpalatable certain decisions are. But I think I would make 2 points in response to that, fair question. Firstly, the reason why policies like this are so important on the basis of humanity and the dignity of human life is that we don't live in an ideal world. We live in a world where there are conflicts almost everywhere we look, where people are, by necessity, having to flee situations where their lives are unsafe. So governments should be working together to try to reduce the conditions that make that necessary, but also try to provide safety. The second point I'd make, and it's one that I think needs to be made more often, yes, there are serious economic conditions in this country, but the idea they are caused by the relatively small number of people seeking sanctuary here, I simply don't think is credible. There are other reasons why the country faces the economic conditions it does right now.
I guess my final question on this, not to repeat it, but it almost also might point to the next topic, is this idea of not letting perfect be the enemy of the good, and whether if one way or another small boat numbers aren't tackled, the result might be Reform winning the next election. What's your view on that and the job at hand that the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary, who you said have inhumane policies, are trying to tackle?
Before I answer that question directly, I should say, just for the record, for the first time in my life, I'm appearing on television not as a party politician, but as the chair of a politically neutral charity. So, my answers will be given in that context. But I think these arguments around asylum and immigration, have to be taken on from a point of principle. Nobody wants to see dangerous small boats crossings. They're dangerous for the people on the small boats, and they're not good for the communities to which asylum seekers then go. But small boats crossings are what happens when there are no safe routes for people fleeing those conditions to come to the UK. So the way to deal with small boats crossings is to have rational, sensible, humane alternatives. And I think that's the argument that politicians, particularly progressive centre-left politicians, need to have the courage and conviction to make much more strongly than has been the case in recent times.
I wanted to move on and talk about broader politics, if we can. And you had massive election victories. And then, despite facing quite a lot of pressure, I think surprised a lot of people in the moment when you decided to say, it's time to go in the interests of the country, in the interests of my party. How did you get to that point? How did you reach that decision?
And let me just repeat what I said earlier on. I'm not here as a party politician, but that's a human question. I mean, I just reached the view that it was better for my party and my country that I stepped aside. At the time I did it, it came as something of a surprise. Not everybody understood or necessarily agreed with that, but I think all leaders reach a point, or should reach a point, when they can make that decision. I mean, obviously, I can't get into the head of other leaders or say what is right and wrong. What I would say, and it goes back to the subject that I'm here to talk about today, is that I think, you know, people, regardless of their politics, watching the scenes in Downing Street this morning, all of the psychodrama there, I guess will wonder who's running the country, who's governing the country when this is happening. And the policy that I'm talking about this morning, as I said earlier on, the suspension of that was meant to be temporary, and yet we don't know what is supposed to be in its place. There is still a vacuum there. And that's just one example of that kind of paralysis of decision-making that can happen when there is all this leadership psychodrama.
One of the things you said when you stepped down was that you felt you'd become too polarising and individual to represent the country. Do you feel that Keir Starmer has got to that point?
Look, I think that's got to be a matter for him and the Labour Party right now. I'm not here to talk party politics, but I do think every leader has to ask themselves a question. I'm not saying it's something you ask actively or consciously every single day, but generally there always has to be an assessment in your mind. Is me staying in this role right for the country? Because you're not there for your own sake, although obviously people have ambitions to be in these positions. You're there to govern the country in the best interests of the country overall. So that's always a question you've got to ask and answer. I'm sure that's a question in Keir Starmer's mind. It would be odd if it wasn't, and he will have to come to his own decision. Of course, it's possible his party will make it for him.
Please don't go anywhere. And I know you just mentioned not to lean too much into the psychodrama. The timing's unbelievable, because we just want to show people that Wes Streeting has just left Downing Street after what we've worked out was an 18-minute meeting. We can have a look at that now.
What did you say, Mr. Streeting?
Did you ask the Prime Minister to resign?
Are you going to resign, Mr. Streeting?
Do you want the job or not?
No, just let me finish this first. So obviously didn't take questions there, an 18-minute conversation. Just to come back as leadership advice, if we can. You know, when authority starts to slip away, what should the Prime Minister fire him?
I think it's, again, look, I feel the need to sort of say I'm here representing a politically neutral charity, so nothing I say here should be taken as the views of Safe Passage International. I think it is curious, and it will be curious if we have a situation going forward where you have within the same cabinet a beleaguered Prime Minister and a cabinet secretary who is clearly trying to undermine and oust him. But these are matters for Keir Starmer. These are matters for the Labour Party. What concerns me, in particular, in the context I'm talking about today, is the need for the decisions of government to continue. There are children languishing in refugee camps right now who should be in the UK with their parents but can't come here because a policy has been suspended and nothing has been put in its place.
I mean, so to round it off on that area, I mean, I guess regardless of what happens to the occupant of number 10, you'd be quite happy to see a change in the occupant of the Home Office, or at least a significant change in policy.
I mean, I don't think it will come as any surprise to anybody knowing my political history to, know that I'm not a great supporter of, the current government. But what I would like to see is a government functioning, and particularly on this issue for the Home Office, to put in place a humane policy to allow children, vulnerable children, some of the most vulnerable children in the world, to be reunited with their parents. And I think regardless of people's overall views on asylum, immigration, politics more generally, surely that's something we can unite behind. So whoever's Prime Minister, whether it's Keir Starmer, Wes Streeting or whoever, I also hope we see a return to more civilised policies around asylum seekers and refugees, because I think that is badly needed.
Just finally, what did you make of... We could talk about the results in Scotland, but I guess we kind of know what your views are there. What did you make about the results in Wales?
Again, won't come as any surprise. The party I led, the SNP, party I led for many years, is the sister party to Plaid Cymru in Wales. So I don't think it will come as any surprise to know that I looked at the election of the new First Minister of Wales yesterday and wanted to warmly congratulate him and wish him well for the future.
We're out of time. Thank you so much for sticking around and allowing us to interrupt it with all of the psychodrama, to use your term. Nicola Sturgeon, thank you so much, the Chair of the Trustees of Safe Passage International.
Well, it was a pretty brief meeting, I have to say.
16 minutes.
16 minutes.
I got it wrong. Not 18.
Yeah, we've had to correct... I mean, it must have been an espresso, I think, is the lesson of that. By the time he got into Downing Street and left, it was a very, very brief meeting. Perhaps not that surprising, given, A, it's a busy day, the King's speech, but B, of course, the tension between the two men. We're going to find out at some point. We're not sure when, but at some point we will know what happened to that meeting.
We can watch again the departure before bringing in Ali to reflect on it. And just, by the way, whilst we listen and watch this, I thought it was pretty interesting from Nicola Sturgeon to say it doesn't seem like a cabinet can continue with both of these two men in it off the back of this. So, look, that's just her view, but she's got experience of these types of things. And while we don't expect action in either direction today, maybe there will be in the days ahead. Ali, 16 minutes only.
Yeah, he was not in there for long and he came out pretty steely-faced. I mean, the fact that he went in through the front door was interesting. There is a back door to Downing Street, so he, I suppose you could say, wanted to be seen. He was filmed going in. We obviously tried to get some questions to him. He didn't answer any of our questions. And then he came out, as you say, just over a quarter of an hour later. So it was not long, hard to see what exactly they could have grappled with policy-wise within that time frame. You know, there were reports that this was going to be a climb down in some form by Wes Streeting yesterday. Hill has allies suggesting that's not the case. But what exactly does that mean? Are we on resignation watch? It is the King's speech today and his team making clear that there will not be anything, we won't be hearing from Wes Streeting after, there will not be anything to distract from that moment. And of course it involves the King, it involves a degree of pageantry and pomp. But what happens after the King's speech, I think, is wide open right now. Did Wes Streeting set out to the Prime Minister his vision for the country? Did he say that things can't go on as they are? Did he say he's going to run for the leadership? Because, of course, we know that a defiant Prime Minister told the Cabinet yesterday, effectively, what we heard from John Major, put up or shut up. If there isn't a leadership race, then if no one's running for the leadership, then the Prime Minister will carry on with business as usual. That is what Number 10 are trying to do. Has Wes Streeting gone in and blown that up with a potential leadership bid? We wait to see, but it looks like today we get through the King's speech, a moment that is meant to deliver policy clarity, set out the long-term legislative government agenda. Will this government be in power for the long term? We wait and see.
Ali, thank you very much. I was going to reflect on that to say I just can't actually believe that it was just 16 minutes long. I mean, that is, by the time he's got in through the door, gone through, you know, got to the room, sat down, it must have been a conversation of, 10 minutes max.
Albeit, I mean, I agree, we were all expecting to go longer, but when you reflect on it, they're not going to be talking health policy for the next hour and funding requirements. So essentially, as we perhaps should have expected, they didn't agree and it was over quickly. I think the question is now, in 24 hours' time after the King's speech, who takes the next step, potentially? Again, I just come back. It's interesting we have to wait to really reach the moment to reflect on it. What Nicola Sturgeon said is it's very, very hard for the two of them to remain in the same cabinet.
Yeah. It's true. The other thing as well to say as well is that, look, we've been focusing an awful lot on the support of Labour MPs. The number of Labour MPs have come out to say they want Keir Starmer to go. This morning, we've heard from Labour-affiliated unions who have a very, very important role in all of these processes, including any leadership process. And this statement says that Labour cannot continue on its current path. Just to bring you the text of it, they go on to say, while we recognise progress has been made, such as aspects of the Employment Rights Act and the increase in the minimum wage, the results at the election last week were devastating. Labour is not doing enough to deliver the change that working people voted for at the general election. That from the affiliated unions, that statement coming out.
Now, last week's results, of course, were very tough for Labour. The party lost more than 1,400 councillors and control of dozens of councils.
Many of those councils run by Reform, including Barnsley, Labour stronghold for no less than 50 years. And we can speak now to the outgoing leader of Barnsley Council, Sir Steven Houghton. Thank you so much for being with us. And, you know, it was just such a bruising set of election results. I can't really imagine what it must feel like in places like Barnsley to feel the impact of that. What's your message to the Labour Party in Westminster?
Something's got to change. There's no doubt about that. The current course is not going to work. The hardest part in many ways were people telling us they weren't going to vote for us in the local elections, despite the fact they thought we were doing a good job. Because they'd fallen out with the current government and particularly the Prime Minister. So that was the hardest thing to take. They weren't passing judgment on us, they were passing judgment on the national picture. So clearly we cannot go on with the course that we've currently got.
You say you can't go on with the course you've currently got. What do you mean by that? Is it time for a change of leader? Is it just the policies that need to change?
I mean, the first thing that needs to change is a policy change. Too many places, and this isn't just Barnsley, it's been across the north, places like South Wales in particular, for the last 30 years have been in economic decline since deindustrialisation, and this also applies to many coastal towns. They've seen their quality of life, they've seen their place itself going downhill, going backwards. So this has been coming for 30 years in many ways, these results, because politicians of all parties over that period have not addressed those fundamental issues, and people clearly now feel left behind. They feel national politicians don't care enough. Those reasons we got Brexit. Those were the reasons Boris Johnson initially got elected. And those are the reasons now Nigel Farage is becoming so popular in those places. So unless we address those fundamental economic issues and give a new economic deal to those towns and communities, and they are largely towns and communities, then I'm afraid the government's going to find itself next year in exactly the same place.
What do you hope happens in the next couple of weeks? How would you like to see it play out?
I mean, firstly, I would like to see the Prime Minister addressing those issues that I've talked about just now. Because it seems that no one, not the Prime Minister or indeed potential candidates, are even thinking about the kind of things that I've just been mentioning to you. So I want to hear that. I don't want to say I want Keir Starmer to stay or I want someone else to come in, because changing personality without changing policy will just get us back where we started. We'll just end up with another unpopular Labour leader in 12 or 18 months' time and another set of difficult elections next year. So someone has to come forward with a new agenda. More of the same isn't going to cut it. So that's the primary thing I want to see. And then, of course, myself and indeed other members of the party and indeed the public themselves can start to form judgment on what's on offer.
What do you think about some of the alternative names that are being put forward? There's an awful lot of talk about Andy Burnham, someone that people are saying, particularly in northern areas that we spent time in, like Tameside, that he is someone who could turn around the fortunes. Is he somebody who you think could make a difference?
I think he could. I think all the candidates, including the Prime Minister, have got an opportunity here to change things around. And there's no doubt Andy Burnham, West Streeting, Angela Rayner, all names that keep being mentioned, have all got the skills to do it, but it isn't going to work unless we get that fundamental policy shift. So what might be successful in the short term, in terms of easing the immediate pressure, will only come back again, as I say, without that rethink about what we're about and where we're going. So I would say to all candidates, all Labour MPs, that's the discussion we need to have now before we start making changes.
So, Steven, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to take a quick break here. Of course, we'll continue all of the coverage. I guess the focus now is on the build-up to the King's speech.
Yeah.
The happy, convenient fire break that was scheduled for just after the locals.
I mean, yeah, the scheduling is another question, but it is actually quite bizarre. You know, this is a big moment. It's the chance for the government to set out its legislative programme. We've got the King, we've got the pomp and pageantry, and it is going to be a little bit surreal, I think it's fair to say, given everything that is going on in the background. An awful lot more to come on the King's speech in the next hour.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Rich and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf. Good morning from both of us. A big day. We're getting ahead of the King's speech.
What did you say to the Prime Minister?
Did you ask the Prime Minister to resign?
Breaking news, Health Secretary Wes Streeting leaves Downing Street after a crunch 16-minute only meeting with the Prime Minister.
And today, Keir Starmer will hope to seize back control of the agenda with the King's speech ahead today.
President Trump flies to China to meet President Xi Jinping and says Iran will be on the agenda.
Also ahead, 10 people connected to the Hantavirus hit cruise ship will be brought back to the UK in case they develop the illness.
Plus, Israel's entry makes it through to the final of Eurovision, despite 5 countries pulling out in protest.
Good morning. Thanks for being with us. Well, the Health Secretary has now left Downing Street. Wes Streeting is out after a meeting with Keir Starmer, just 16 minutes long. And, of course, this is a day after the Prime Minister faced calls to resign. Wes Streeting was in number 10 for 16 minutes, as we said, and despite calls from journalists, gave nothing away about what was discussed inside number 10 with the PM. Let's bring in now Ali, who's there in Downing Street. And Ali, not a long meeting, I guess, is the key takeaway.
Yes, meetings between Secretaries of State and the Prime Minister are not normally just over 15 minutes long. I think that was the first significant thing, where Streeting looked pretty stony-faced as he came out. There's been some talk that we were going to see a climb down, in some sense, from Wes Streeting. His allies suggesting that that's not how they would describe it. What does that mean? What did they achieve in 16 odd minutes? What did the Health Secretary say to the Prime Minister? Did he say that he needs to see more, or did he say that he is going to resign, that he's going to go for the leadership? We don't know. I think what we do know is that we're about to have the King's speech. We're about to see the King process into Parliament, and that gives the Prime Minister some sort of reprieve, I think, because it is a moment of pageantry, a moment of pomp, a moment where the government's meant to set out its clear legislative agenda, and no one is going to distract from that. Allies of Wes Streeting saying that we're not going to be hearing from them after that meeting, that they don't want to distract from the King's speech. But will we be hearing from them in the days to come after the King's speech? We're expecting a speech from Wes Streeting on Thursday about NHS stats. I think all eyes will be on that. This, of course, is after the Prime Minister did a John Major and said, put up or shut up. There's no leadership contest at the moment. We've seen defiance from number 10. We've seen ministers, cabinet ministers, after the meeting yesterday coming out, backing the Prime Minister, 100 plus, signing a letter saying that he should stay. Although I should say a couple of those on that list don't seem to have known that their names were going to be used. But we have also seen 80 plus MPs now saying that they want the Prime Minister to go. We've seen ministerial resignations. We've seen PPS's, ministerial aides, resigning. Those people cannot unsay what they've said. They can't put that back in a box. That is going to make things very, very difficult for the Prime Minister. The number is more than they would need for a parliamentary defeat. The number is more than would be needed to row in behind one leadership candidate and trigger a leadership contest. The Prime Minister is in an incredibly tricky spot, and there is no knowing where things go from here. He survived the day yesterday. How many more will he survive?
Yeah, this is it, Ali. I feel like we're on a roller coaster, and analysis just keeps changing all the time, and briefings changing all the time. It's hard to keep up. I guess the one thing we know is how long Wes Streeting was in there, and it is just worth pausing. 16 minutes, and that's from going in and out the door. I mean, presumably there was a bit of kind of faffing around inside, getting into the room, sitting down, asking if you wanted a coffee. Or maybe, I just can't believe how short it was.
I can't get over that either. I mean, it clearly wasn't a kind of long conversation about policy or vision or direction. It obviously was, was one side getting a message, a direct message to the other side. 16 minutes from going in and out, that's not even the meeting. So it's not long, but we haven't seen any cabinet ministerial resignations yet. I mean, if you look back to when I was on Downing Street when Boris Johnson's government was collapsing, we were seeing ministers resign as quickly as they were being appointed, the government unable to function. That's not where we are at right now. But the Prime Minister is hobbling on. I should also say we've had a letter from Labour's affiliated unions saying that they think he can't stand at the next election. We do, though, understand that GMB warned against that letter. That is significant. Things continue to move and will continue to do so over the coming days.
Ali, great stuff. Thank you very much for that. Let's bring you some of the comments from high-profile guests we've had already today, including the Labour Cabinet Minister, Nick Thomas-Symonds.
I was speaking to him last night, in fact, and I went round to see him, actually, in Downing Street last night. He was in a very determined mood and very determined...
So he wants to fight the next election, then? He does?
The Prime Minister absolutely wants to deliver on the mandate that he was given in 2024. He said that a number of times. And to fight the next election, yes, just to be absolutely clear on your question. And he is somebody who... He's very resilient. He's probably one of the most resilient people that I've ever met. But he also has that absolute commitment to deliver the change that people voted for nearly 2 years ago now.
I just want to reflect on the change in message in just 24 hours, because we've spoken to two key allies of Keir Starmer on this programme and on yesterday's morning's programme. The same question posed to them, will he fight the next election? And the answer is completely different. So there's Nick Thomas-Symonds saying, yes, he will. 24 hours ago, exactly, Darren Jones said, I can't get ahead of any decision the Prime Minister is going to take. And what that tells us is that Number 10 and Team Starmer feel in a much more confident position they do this morning than they did yesterday morning. Whether or not that is, valid or not, we're going to find out. We don't know what West Streeting says. Maybe he has got the numbers. But at the minute, I think that answer from Nick Thomas-Symonds tells us an awful lot about the growth and confidence in Number 10.
Also, just want to mention the statement that Ali briefly mentioned from Labour's affiliated unions, saying the party can't continue on its current path. Here's their statement. It's clear the Prime Minister will not lead Labour into the next election, and at some stage a plan will have to be put in place for the election of a new leader. This is a point where the future of the party we founded will be debated and determined, and we are working closely as unions to shape a shared vision on policy, political strategy and economic policy that will reorient Labour back to working people, so Labour do what it was elected to do, govern in the interests of workers.
And Wolf, you spoke to Nicola Sturgeon as well this morning, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, framed a question on the grounds of you won massive elections, you then at some point decided in the best interests of the country I had to stand down, and in light of that asked about her views on what Keir Starmer might be thinking at the moment.
I do think every leader has to ask themselves a question. I'm not saying it's something you ask actively or consciously every single day, but generally there always has to be an assessment in your mind. Is me staying in this role right for the country? Because you're not there for your own sake, although obviously people have ambitions to be in these positions. You're there to govern the country in the best interests of the country overall. So that's always a question you've got to ask and answer. I'm sure that's a question in Keir Starmer's mind. It would be odd if it wasn't, and he will have to come to his own decision. Of course, it's possible his party will make it for him.
Of course, she also questioned the idea of Starmer and Streeting staying in the same cabinet moving forward, and interesting to see what happens there, but also said that she thought the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary's policies were inhumane, talking about various refugee-related policies. So I thought it was very interesting to hear from her.
Well, we're talking a lot, of course, about the politics this morning, but the economics really, really matter as well. And some Labour MPs have had a very worried eye on what's going on with the markets, which have, got into a pretty bad place as a result with all the uncertainty, borrowing costs hitting a near 20-year high. Here's our economics and data editor, Ed Conway.
Well, we seem to be back on the roller coaster again, and once again looking at charts like this. This is showing you the UK government bond yield. It's the cost of borrowing for the UK government, but it kind of affects all of us as well. It was around about 5% just last week. Then, of course, we had the local election results, and kind of after that, it started to push up. But the thing that's really sparked the latest increase is all of that leadership speculation that's been happening in the past 24 hours, and you can see how it went up really sharply. Then the Prime Minister came out and said, look, I'm staying. And as a result, it's kind of settled around about there, 5.1%. But it's worth just putting that into a bit of historical perspective. So 5.1%, this is the UK government 10-year government bond yield going back to 2008. And just for some context, that's 2022. That's the mini-budgets. That spike there. Well, as you can probably see, look, we are higher now than we have been since 2008 when it comes to UK government borrowing rates. And that's basically the market casting its judgment on the UK. And why are they doing that? Well, we'll come on to kind of the government side of it in a moment. But partly it's because, we have really high inflation in the UK, and obviously we're facing this energy price shock. And even before the energy price shock. This is showing you the average rate of inflation across other G7 nations. Here's what's striking. Look at the UK. That's the red line here. And look at where we are in relation to the rest. We used to be kind of middle of the pack, or kind of around about kind of average. And now we're above. We're kind of an outlier when it comes to inflation. And that's before this shock that is coming our way in terms of inflation. So there's an inflation worry. And then on top of that, there's a fiscal worry. And what's that? It's basically the government has a lot of challenges right now, OK? And when you look at public spending, OK, that's that line there. As a percentage of GDP, going all the way back to the 1940s, it is really high, OK? So the amount of public spending right now, just, again, to show you some context, OK, it is at the kind of level. We've only seen a few times where it's been higher than it is right now. COVID in 2020, the financial crisis in 2008, in the 1970s, and the oil price shock. That's not very flattering when it comes to comparisons of public spending, and yet that's kind of where we're heading to at the moment. So public spending is high, and so too are taxes. If you look at taxes as a percentage of GDP, the total tax burden, that is also heading up to the highest level basically ever, certainly since the 1940s, and in the coming years, maybe even higher still. So taxes are going up, spending is high, and at the same time, look down here, this is debt interest. So that's the debt that we're kind of paying 5% or more on right now. Even before that, it was at the highest level, or one of the highest levels that we've seen in recent history. So put that all together, and people are wondering, OK, how are you going to sort that out? And the short answer is you need a strong government to be able to kind of deal with challenges like that. And that's kind of what it looked like Keir Starmer had. He had this stonking majority back in the last election, 411 MPs voted through, a landslide. But of course, he hasn't been able to sort that out. And now people are looking at the polling, people out there in markets, looking at the polling, looking at what we saw in local elections. And what does that show you? Well, here's our kind of projection based on the national equivalent vote share. It shows there's potentially a hung parliament, or a chance of a hung parliament, and no majority. And that makes it even more difficult to deal with all these deep-seated problems that the UK has, which is why we're facing so much financial fallout.
Just mentioned as well the slight improvement in borrowing costs today relative to the last couple of days, but it's more a case of it's not still getting worse than any significant shift back in direction.
We should say as well, we have had another another Labour MP coming out this morning while we've been on air calling on Keir Starmer to step down. This is Kevin McKenna, who is the MP for Sittingbourne and Sheppey. In his statement that he's posted on social media, he talked about the signals from the public at the local elections in England, also saying, on Monday, the Prime Minister said we must face up to the big challenges, and I agree with him. However, in his speech, he did not demonstrate the vision for urgent change that my constituents need. So, interestingly, saying that he listened to Keir Starmer's response to those election results on Monday and found it lacking. And he also specifically pointed to the resignation letter, that blistering letter from Jess Phillips, as a reason that he decided that he couldn't keep his views private anymore. So one more person added to that tally.
More coverage, of course, of all of that to come, including build-up to the King's speech. But next, President Trump is on his way to Beijing, where he says that he'll ask China's President Xi Jinping to, in his words, open up China to US tech companies.
So he was speaking to reporters before taking off. The President also confirmed that Iran will be on the agenda.
What is your message to President Xi as it relates to the Iran war?
Well, I think, number one, we're going to have a long talk about it. I think he's been relatively good, to be honest with you. You look at the blockade, no problems. They get a lot of their oil from that area. We've had no problem, and he's been a friend of mine. He's been somebody that we get along with. And I think you're going to see that good things are going to happen.
Let's bring in our Asia correspondent, Helen Ann Smith, who's in Beijing. Helen Ann, do you think the agenda of this has been turned on its head because of the Iran war, or are there other long-standing higher priorities?
Look, I think it's changed the agenda for sure. I think it's also changed the power dynamic between the two. But look, President Trump is on his way, and is on his way to what's being billed as a historic summit, perhaps the most important summit between the leaders of China and the US for a decade. And I don't think that's overblowing it, because I think it's that Iran war that's the context, isn't it? The context that we are living in this very volatile moment, that both of these leaders are going to need to be seen to manage, and the competition between them is incredibly high. They need to be able to connect on a leader-to-leader level. There needs to be some sort of easy deals that they can both take home to their respective publics to show success. And frankly, there needs to not be a boil over of tensions that would make things much more dangerous going forward. Look, we heard from President Trump while he was in the air on his Truth Social account. In his post, he firstly had a quick pop at the media. He wanted to set the record straight about the guest list that he said some had been misquoting. He wanted to particularly make a point that a man called Jensen Huang was on the plane. Now, he matters because he's the CEO of NVIDIA, the all-important US chip company. China wants more access to those chips. So for Trump, that particular CEO being present is really, really important. He also said in that post that he wants China to open up and that, quote, that would be my very first request. Interesting, I think, really pointing towards the sort of the trade issues, because, of course, so much of the narrative and so much of the discussion has been about that Iran war. Trade is kind of the easy bit, I think, and I think it is an area where both leaders will be able to go home afterwards and talk about some success. I think there will be some deals. I think there's certain things on both sides that are not difficult for each other to give. And look, both want a bit of stability. Remember last year that escalating trade war got really out of hand and it didn't help either of them. China, for its part, would like lower tariffs, but what it really wants is predictability and stability in that area. But look, it is the global context that is all important. And Trump really is not in the best position. He comes to China, cap in hand, if you like, needing their help to influence the Iranians to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And look, be in no doubt, China are going to use that leverage. They're not going to give Trump what he wants on a platter. They might quite like the idea of being seen as the global power broker, but that's going to come at a price. And the price probably is them pushing for the things that they want. And of course, top of that list is Taiwan, the all-important self-governing island that it sees as a breakaway province. And look, while I don't think we're going to see some huge breakthrough on the US's or huge change in the US's position on Taiwan, you know, the Chinese will be pushing gradually and incrementally over this summit, over future meetings in the coming months and years. And they see Donald Trump as a golden opportunity to push for what they want on that issue. I just want to leave you with one final thing that was written up in the Chinese state media in the last day, because I think it gives you a little idea of where the government's head is at here in China. It says this: attempting to deal with China from, quote, a position of strength is not a rational choice. What they are saying overtly is that China can't be bullied. This sort of Trump trying to kind of throw his weight around to get what he wants. They are saying that's not going to work here. We're going to match strength with strength. We are absolutely your equal. And we're not going to just lie down and do whatever you want in these meetings. And I think watch that very closely, because I think that will be the Chinese strategy.
Hanna, great stuff. Thanks so much. We're looking forward to ongoing coverage. Next couple of days, of course, they're in the air at the moment, the US contingent. So full coverage from the team in Beijing once they arrive.
Now, we want to bring you an update on the Hantavirus cruise ship, something I know lots of people following very closely. The Youth Health Security Agency says it's going to continue to support Brits who were on that cruise ship affected by the virus. They've been isolating at Arrow Park Hospital, Merseyside, but expected to leave soon and then continue isolating at home.
Well, Olivia's here. And Olivia, what details have been confirmed this morning?
Well, as we've been saying this morning, the UK Health Security Agency have told Sky News that 72 hours isn't a limit. So it's not clear, actually, whether those people are going to be going home anytime soon, even though they're coming to the end of that isolation period. The health officials say that clinical assessments and testing of 20 British nationals, a German UK resident and a Japanese national, all of whom were passengers on MV Hondius, are well underway with their testing at Arrow Park Hospital in Merseyside. And once they are allowed to go home, they will have to self-isolate for 42 days because of this long incubation period of hantavirus. In the meantime, we also know that 10 people have been brought to the UK from the UK's overseas territories of St Helena and Ascension Island. Now, officials are very much saying this is a precautionary measure because they aren't demonstrating any symptoms or anything, but if they were to become ill, when they're here, it means that they would have access to the emergency medical services that they would need. So far, 3 people have died in this outbreak. 2 of them, it's been confirmed, has been from Hantavirus. The World Health Organization says that they have 11 confirmed or probable cases, and that the evacuation and repatriation of these 150 passengers and crew has now taken place. It happened at the beginning of this week. Now, there are plenty of people who've been saying that they should have stayed on the ship, right? But the WHO has said that that would have been inhumane because a lot of those passengers were suffering from mental breakdown, because I'm sure it would have been a really frightening experience for them over these last few weeks. Health officials keen to stress that this is a situation that is under control. They say robust arrangements are in place and there is currently no sign of any larger outbreak.
Olivia, great stuff. Thank you.
Well, we're going to be, of course, building up to the King's speech, which is happening later on this morning. Can Keir Starmer seize back the agenda for his government? We'll also be hearing from the Conservatives. Alex Bergard up in a few minutes' time.
We're trying to see as much as we can. We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood has rallied around her. It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty.
War isn't pretty.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
All eyes on Downing Street this morning, where Wes Streeting, Health Secretary, potential leadership rival, has been in and out of number 10 already for a meeting with the Prime Minister. The time between him opening the door to go in and closing the door to go out was about 17 minutes, which I think shows what a quick meeting this was. Very, very brief. I think we can bring you images of the Health Secretary walking up Downing Street and number 10. Let's bring you those now.
Are you going to resign, Health Secretary?
Yeah, go.
Are you going to resign? What are you going to say to the Prime Minister, Health Secretary?
Are you going to stand for leader? Are you going to challenge the Prime Minister?
I mean, he chose to do the walk-in on camera, so he chose to face those barrage of questions, which I think tells you something in itself, that this is a man who wants it to be known that he's going in to talk to the Prime Minister. We might not get the content of the conversation for a little while because of the King's speech. No one's going to want to overshadow the King, right? So we might have to take a breather before we find out exactly what is going on. But things still pretty febrile. We can talk now to the Conservatives. The Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Alex Burghardt, is here. Brief meeting. What do you make of it?
I mean, look, I've no idea what went on in there, but it's clear that this is just a very unstable situation. And the Labour whips could only find 100 people to say that they supported the Prime Minister. And then it turned out that some of those people didn't even agree to sign the letter. You know, they've got 400 MPs. Only 100 people will go out over the go out in public to the Prime Minister.
I guess what
so
allies
it's just unsustainable.
I guess what Alistair Keir-Starmer would say is that the other side haven't got the numbers either, right? They've called their bluff. They've said, all right.
Yep. No, I think it's conceivable that the Prime Minister will hang on, and that will mean that we're going to have more uncertainty, and that's just very bad for the country. And I don't take any delight in this. I find it very depressing because you can see that the bond markets are reacting in a very unfavourable way. That means that the cost of government borrowing is going to go up. It means that taxpayers are going to see more of their tax money go on servicing the interest on the national debt. And some people are going to lose their jobs. And that's why I'd rather we weren't in this situation. But given that we are, it would be better that this was sorted out very quickly. And it's not going to be sorted out by the Prime Minister staying.
So you think he should resign?
Absolutely. I thought he should resign for some time. You know, the work that Kemi and the Conservatives did to expose big failings in his policy agenda and his failures of judgment over Peter Mandelson taught me that he was not fit to do the job.
It brings me back to the time when Boris Johnson was kind of forced out by his own party. We're not there yet because Keir Starmer is still able to fill the positions. When people resign, he has supporters to fill those positions, unlike Boris Johnson. Just talk me through where you were there. You were a minister at the time?
Yeah, I was a minister in the Department for Education in 2022, and I resigned. I was very sad about it. I'd known Boris well and worked with him, but it was clear that it couldn't carry on, and given where we were, it was much better that it was sorted out as quickly as possible. And so these things aren't nice. They're not much fun, and they're not very edifying. They're not very good for the country. But it's very clear that that's where we are. And if the Labour Party doesn't sort this out soon, things are going. There will be a material difference to the economy, and that's not acceptable.
How? I guess if you were kind of like looking at those in the Labour Party who've done the same as you did under Boris Johnson, as in quit their post or publicly come out and say it's got to go, it feels like they haven't got to the same point that you did.
This is, I think, what are we, sort of 2 days since people started resigning. And in that time, almost 100 Labour MPs have said that he should go. And that's a big chunk. It's a quarter of the whole parliamentary party. 100 of Labour MPs are ministers. So this is seismic. And I think we saw 4 government ministers resign yesterday. I'm sure that's not the end of it. So just the Prime Minister needs to face up to the fact that it's over and that clinging on to power is not going to do him or anyone else any good.
This is all really, the kind of main trigger for this has been the devastating set of election results that Labour saw last week. I just want to talk to you about the Conservatives.
So can I just sort of jump in there? Because one of the reasons why the Labour Party did so badly at those local elections was because of the work that the Conservative Party had done to expose Keir Starmer's very, very poor judgment over Peter Mandelson, and also to force him into U-turning on a number of his policies, which had been shown to be bad for the country. Now, and I know what you want to say. Obviously, we didn't have...
Can I just say it?
Yeah,
do you mind?
No, go on.
Yeah?
I'll let you ask.
Thank you. I will ask the question first, if that's OK, even if it is the question you expect me to ask. But what I was going to say is that it was there's been some focus on the few bright points of the Conservatives in like a couple of councils in London. But this is a party that it seems to me those election results are showing is in decline. There are not the green shoots of recovery there. So do you need to start looking at your own souls in the same way that Labour is?
Not at all, and that was the question I expected you to ask. Yeah. But if you go back 2 years, that's when we went into massive decline. We had our worst ever election defeat. And our results in the local elections this year were better than they were the year before.
Hundreds of councillors.
As
You're
a proportion,
in opposition.
That's right. Look,
you should be picking up here, guys. Come on.
And our vote share was larger in 2026 than it was in 2025. And you will know that we now have the most popular political leader. If you ask people who they'd most like to have as Prime Minister, they say Kemi Badenoch. We're the most trusted party on the economy. And these things are necessary, but they're not sufficient.
I mean,
we know that we have a lot more recovery to do. But we also know that there's quite a long way to run in this party.
I think you're right. You're right. Kemi Badenoch's leadership ratings are, actually pretty good compared to everyone else from a low base. She needs to ditch the rest of you because you're dragging her down, aren't you? My goodness.
No, I disagree with that. She appointed a new team, and we're a good team actually. I've worked in a lot of different political groupings over the past sort of 15 years. And the levels of trust and cooperation in Kemi's team are really, really high, and it's why we've been getting results in Westminster. We need to turn that into results in local elections in the country. But I really think that when you get, 3 years down from now, when you're in front of the country saying, who do you want to have as your Prime Minister? Who do you want to have in charge of the economy? Who do you think has a plan? Is it going to be Labour? I think they're bust. Is it going to be Nigel Farage, who can't go on the media at the moment because somebody put £5 million into his private bank account? Is it going to be Zach Polanski, who doesn't pay his council tax and believes in hypnotism and heroin? Or is it going to be the Conservative Party, who actually have a plan for the future? I'm confident if we do the right things between now and then, we can do all right then.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Alex Burgart there talking for the Conservatives. Coming up, of course, we are going to be focusing on a very, very busy day ahead. That meeting, of course, between Wes Streeting and Keir Starmer already happened. You might have missed it, blink and miss it. We're also, of course, building up to the King's speech, all coming up. Welcome back. Well, Wes Streeting, Health Secretary, went to number 10. He had his meeting with Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister. This is him walking into the door, and then he came out 16 or 17 minutes later. It was quick.
Making us all wonder, what would you have time to discuss in just 17 minutes if it wasn't a detailed policy discussion, which, let's be honest, we never expected. But let's get to Ali, who was outside, and Ali, it was pretty much as short as could be.
Yeah, this was billed as a coffee before the meeting, but as Sophie was saying, it seems more like an espresso. It is hard to see what they really could have chewed through in terms of policy or in terms of vision or in terms of anything proper. I mean, you know, if these were peace talks, you just have got to imagine that it would have lasted a little bit more than the 16 odd minutes that we saw Wes Streeting inside the door of number 10 for. So what was going on in there? I mean, you know, cabinet ministers meeting the Prime Minister usually get quite a decent chunk of time. We know that after cabinet yesterday, where the Prime Minister was defiant, where he did a John Major, he said put up or shut up. If there is no leadership challenger, then he is going to fight on. No one has gone for the leadership yet. He was defiant in cabinet. We saw ministers coming out speaking to the media after, I should say, including people like Peter Carl, a big backer of the Health Secretary. Wes Streeting, we understand, tried to speak to the Prime Minister after cabinet, but that didn't happen yesterday. It did happen this morning. It was such a short meeting. We don't know what they discussed, but was Wes Streeting trying to get a direct message to the Prime Minister? Was that a message that he wants to see change? Was it a message that he's going to resign? Was it a message that he's going to throw his hat in for the ring for the leadership? Allies of Wes Streeting say that we're not going to hear anything now. It's the King's speech. They don't want to distract from that important moment of pageantry. We're expecting the King soon to be heading towards Parliament. No one wants to distract from that. That has offered the Prime Minister a bit of a reprieve. But where we go from here, no one knows. I should briefly just say we've also had a letter from Labour's affiliated unions, really significant, saying that they don't think he can lead the party into the next election. That is a really significant letter as well. The unions, of course, you know, in the bloodstream of the Labour Party, historically given them a lot of money, less now, but still significant. So lots of things are still moving, a reprieve perhaps to the King's speech, but what happens next?
Ali, thank you very much indeed. We just have a little bit of breaking news to bring you before continuing with that story today. Very sadly, the bodies of 3 women had been recovered just off Brighton, in the sea off Brighton, at around 5:45 in the morning. It was near Madeira Drive. Emergency services called, and very sadly then, the bodies of 3 women recovered. We've got a statement through from the police, Sussex Police. Chief Superintendent Adam Hayes said, "This is a tragic incident and a fast-moving inquiries are ongoing to confirm the identities of these 3 women and understand exactly what's happened. I know this is concerning for the community, but I would ask the public to stay away from the scene at this time while emergency services continue their work." They say that they'll provide further updates, but the bodies of 3 women found in the sea near Brighton.
We'll bring you those further updates when we get them. Let's pivot back to the top story this morning, the pressure on the Prime Minister as he just met the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, for just 17 minutes or so. We can speak to a Labour MP who is backing the Prime Minister, Toby Perkins, who joins us now. Very good morning to you. How are you doing?
Morning.
Why do you still back the Prime Minister?
Well, I mean, the Prime Minister has an electoral mandate. He is, I think, working hard. We recognise we had local elections that were very tough. But I think that with the global situation the country's facing right now, the last thing that we need is to get into the last thing the country needs is the uncertainty of a leadership campaign, the division of a leadership campaign. Actually, what we need is for people to get behind this King's speech that's going to be delivered and get on with delivering the programme we're elected to do.
I guess, you know, what people on the other side of the argument would say, and you know this as a MP for Chesterfield, is that you look at the elections and there was a clear message from the public they need something to change. And then you had a speech by the Prime Minister where not that much seemed to change, right? You know, didn't really announce anything that different or exciting. It was the same kind of arguments that we've heard before. Do you think that the Prime Minister is the man who can really win back those areas for Labour?
Well, I think so. I hope so. But I think he's earned the right, having taken the Labour Party over after our worst ever defeat, led us to our best ever victory. He's earned the right to get through choppy waters. You know, I think we spent a lot of time saying that we inherited a country in a terrible state, but I'm not sure my colleagues have actually internalised what that means. It isn't an easy task, and I think we have delivered in a number of ways. I do think we've got to up our game. I'm not in denial about the scale of those results, but I do think that it's important from the perspective of the party and most importantly the country that the Prime Minister has been seen after the chopping and changing we had under the last government, has been seen to be given a chance to bring this programme through. And, you know, we should remember, over the years, governments have always done badly in local elections. You know, I remember Thatcher doing terribly in 1981.
Yeah, but there's a bit of a limit, isn't there, as well, though, right?
Well,
like, look at Scotland, look at Wales, look at London. You know, this is historic.
These were historically bad defeats, but, you know, we are in different times. In the past, there was only the Conservatives. Occasionally, we'd lose lots of seats to the Lib Dems in the middle of the term. We do now have options to the far left and to the far right. And so, you know, people are availing themselves of those options. I say, I'm not in denial about the state of those results, but I do believe that right now, particularly because we said that we were coming to power to end the chaos of the previous government, that making sure the Prime Minister has had the time to lay out a case with all his cabinet behind him is the most sensible thing for us to do.
Is all of his cabinet behind him?
Well, no, clearly we have significant issues at the moment. You know, there are people, you know, a lot of my colleagues advocating for a change in leadership. Primarily, not many of them are suggesting we need significant change in policy, are they? What they are primarily saying is we need to sell the message better. And I don't disagree that we need to sell the message better. But I think that, you know, while some will say the Labour Party, you know, will only survive with a new leader, you know, my view is that the party and the wider sort of centre-left progressive movement actually recognise that the Prime Minister has re-established us on the international stage, is making progress on measures, everything from immigration to the National Health Service, and that right now, with the global insecurity we have, is not the right time for a leadership contest, particularly given that we haven't yet got anyone who's stepped forward with the requisite number.
He is desperately unpopular personally. So if that doesn't change and bounce by the end of the year, would you change your position or do you stick to the principle?
Absolutely, except that, you know, there is a limit at which you say that the Prime Minister isn't going to be able to carry the country. I just don't believe that less than 2 years in, given what we inherited and the global situation that we face, is the moment to jump ship and try somebody else. I really think he does need time. And I think that Keir Starmer would recognise if ultimately he felt that he wasn't able to persuade the country, I think if people experience things getting better in their pockets, in the health service, then their view on him might change. And if not, then at that point, at some point in the future, of course, you have to be open to someone else stepping forward.
Can I ask you about West Streeting? Because I'll be honest, we're getting an awful lot of pretty negative briefings from Team Starmer about West Streeting, saying he hasn't got the numbers, that actually, you know, he's so hated within the party that he's not going to get there, that there's anger towards him, towards Labour MPs. What's your own view towards the Health Secretary at the minute?
Well, listen, I mean, I've got tremendous respect for Wes. I think he's doing a great job as the Health Secretary. You know, he's had his meeting. We'll hear what he has to say following that. I'm not really wanting to come onto your programme, take pot shots at others, and I think that's the real danger with a leadership contest is that actually what we do is we descend into different groups. Through the first 2 years of this government, we've had a very united parliamentary Labour Party, and I fear that coming out of a leadership contest, we won't be as united.
Looking at the 2024 intake, a lot of them who've added their names to the list. Do you think they just don't get it? You know, that you've obviously been around a lot longer. You've seen what it's like in opposition. Do you think some of these guys have just got no idea how good they got it?
I wouldn't like to use that phrase, but, you know, many of them have not faced electoral defeat at any point. Many of them have spent much of their time knocking on doors and getting pretty positive responses, and this election recently may have come as a bit of a shock. My first period as a parliamentary candidate was in the teeth of the expenses scandal, the global banking crisis. And
but they all loved you on the doorstep back then.
So, yeah. You know, I have been around the block, as you can see from the way I look. But, you know, without wanting to point fingers, I do think there may be some who will have come as a shock. The difference between the doorsteps this time and 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Toby, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you very much.
Toby Perkins there giving the case for Keir Starmer. It's important, I think, to say, look, we often get all of the MPs coming out saying he's got to go, and there are a chunk of MPs, including the person we just heard from, who think that actually that would be a grave mistake. So we're trying to reflect the kind of full spectrum of views in the party today.
When we come back, we'll continue our build-up to the King's speech.
Over there, to your left. There have been airstrikes every day. Hezbollah are very sensitive about us showing any pictures, and we're being hurried away right now. It felt akin to riding into some sort of Armageddon. Many other areas have been hit badly. There are shells coming in every few minutes. Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city, where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford, and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
It's trying to hit us. That's it. It got us then.
There's a lot of action going on. A lot of hits coming in still. We were the first journalists and the only outsiders to reach the site of the attack several weeks after it happened.
We found from the missile.
It's very difficult to see what around here could be conceived of as a legitimate military target.
Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, a boat seriously overcrowded.
This is one of the most severe viruses in the world. Clearly not had very much to eat at all, a lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa! Getting up close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
The cameras are poised here, there, everywhere.
The day those present would never forget.
First question, Sky News.
Do you hate the thought of losing to him?
I hate the thought of losing to anyone.
Historic day here today.
They are pushing forward.
They dashed to the water.
Wait, what country are you
from? The UK.
Why don't you go back to your country?
Huge questions to be grappled with.
That is totally unprecedented.
Been quite some day.
We start with breaking news.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out!
What more do you need?
Welcome back. The King will deliver his speech for the official state opening of Parliament later this morning in a day of pomp and pageantry. He'll don the imperial state crown and ceremonial robes before leading the royal procession to the chamber of the House of Lords, where MPs will gather to watch him deliver the speech.
Well, we're joined now by someone who knows an awful lot about the process of these ceremonial moments, the former Black Rod, Lieutenant General David Leakey. Great to have you with us. So just talk us through the moment of the King's speech. This is a huge moment ceremonially, but also politically as well, right?
I think there's an important distinction to make here. It is the coming together of the Constitution and politics. And politics at the moment has gone a bit feral.
Just for a change.
Just for a change, we're used to it. The King has seen this over his lifetime. That's the politics. The Constitution is the infrastructure around which politics works. And the point about the state opening of Parliament is this ceremony has been like this for decades, centuries, and it is an anchor point of stability. And the King will come and he'll put the crown on and there will be the ceremony. It's been the same forever. And he will deliver the government's prospective legislative programme. And it doesn't matter what the feral politics are. We, the people in the country, and actually in the rest of the world, can look and see that our Constitution is at least stable. We go through this theatrical act of the state opening of Parliament, and it's like a lot of other things in this country. There's a lot of ceremony and pageantry and theatre about what we do, but it's part of our historical legacy. It's part of the stability which has given our country such political stability for a long, long time.
It's interesting that you kind of say all of that, the sort of positive spin about how it shows continuity and stability. But equally, we don't typically have the King's speech days after, nationwide elections that were, quite clearly in the run-up going to cause pressure for the government of the day, pressure which could hardly be peaking more than it is. I mean, that feels calculated. Maybe it wasn't the date setting, but will it not either way have annoyed the King that he's somewhat dragged in to now helping bring at least a day's worth of stability back to the Prime Minister?
It won't have annoyed the King at all, no, and you won't detect that either. And just think about this. I mean, of course, the state opening comes just after the local election and the turmoil that we've seen on that and the political changing of the landscape we've seen around that. But the same thing happens at general elections. And we saw that, we've seen that over the last 10 or 15 years when there have been quite short-term general elections called at short notice and political turmoil around that. And then after a general election, you immediately have the state opening of Parliament, and the sovereign comes to the state opening of Parliament and reads the King's speech, or the Queen's speech as it used to be, and sets out the government. And it doesn't matter whether it's been a general election or local elections. It doesn't matter how much political turmoil there's been. There is an anchor point of the King's speech and the setting out of the government's. And in a way, one hopes, and I expect the government probably hopes, and I think the country, and I've been doing a lot of speaking recently to all sorts of groups, and the message I hear when people ask me about what's going on in Parliament, not that I've been there for 7 years, because I retired from Black Rod 7 years ago, but the one thing people want is stability and certainty, and not turmoil. And things like the state opening of Parliament are anchor points. People recognise what's going on there. And I think people hope that the setting of the King's speech, the new legislative programme, might help towards bringing some sort of political continuation of a steady course.
Can you just talk a bit about the role of Black Rod? Because it's one of those things in Parliament that I find utterly fascinating, but, I don't think most people know about this kind of really ancient sort of traditions that we have. So what is Black Rod that you were, of course?
The role has been going... It's a very recent invention into our Constitution. It's only been going since 1450.
Oh, very new.
Yes, so it's very
modern.
New. And the role started by Black Rod being, as it were, the custodian of access, order and discipline amongst the Order of the Garter, the Knights of the Garter. There were 25 knights. Not all of them were respectful to the king or loyal to the king, and Black Rod used to have the king's ear and explain to him what was going on. he would keep access and order around the Order of the Garter. There wasn't, in 1450, a police force, for example, or even G4S or anything else. Someone had to stop people throwing tomatoes at the royal procession and so on. So that role in the Order of the Garter migrated into the Palace of Westminster and stayed in the Palace of Westminster since the early 16th and even the 15th century. And so what Black Rod was doing, controlling access, order and discipline around the Palace of Westminster, has been the same for the last 500 years, and lots of added responsibilities onto the top of that as well.
Dave, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And I must say, your reference there to it being a recent development in the 1400s reminds me of my favourite of the King's jokes in America the other week, where he said, 250 years ago, or as we say in England, just the other day.
I love it. Very good.
I doubt we'll get the gags from the King today. He'll be reading from the script, and we'll be building up to that on the other side of this break. King's speech, of course, coming up in the next hour or two. You know exactly when it's coming up. When is it coming up?
It is 11:30.
There we go.
Exactly.
In the next hour and a half. More to come after this.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting. The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty.
War isn't pretty.